It's called
Hey.
Face Rig.
Could you send me
It's
like
just
a
like
link or something?
Yeah, I'll send it to you. No problem.
My brother, I think my brother wants to get involved in politics, like in like some of these panels and like maybe streaming, but his line of work, like he's probably I think he considers himself conservative, but he just works with like so many. He's a musician, so everybody in his circle is to the left and sometimes to the left of like communist. I mean, so he just has to be like, it's not worth losing work over, I guess. But he does feel like offering his 2 cents, I guess.
Oh.
And he's very intelligent. He went to the New School for Jazz. Actually, he went to like one of the most liberal arts schools there is.
Thanks for being here, everyone. Thank you for being here, Nacho. Thanks for stopping by once again, Doobie, Red Charlotte. Mods. If you could let people in, that'd be quite useful. If you could let individuals in.
Can we let in my girl Patty? She's amazing.
Could you let Okay, all right, so it's happening. All right, so people are coming in.
Prime, my dearest, how are you?
Hey.
Hello.
Yo.
Hey.
I ran into a fence and busted my hand real bad today. It was excellent.
Oof.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I twisted my ankle at basketball today, so I feel you.
That
But
combined with shitty internet, I hope you'll forgive me, Prime, but I think I'm going to go Sam's video today. Does that sound good with you?
Sure.
You know what expressions I'll be making. You can picture the beautiful, like, poofy, curly hair that I've got.
I'm still trying to, like, remember. I don't know why I said that. I'm trying to remember where in my head, like, where did I see that number where I thought that only 60 lynchings happened? Like, I'm trying to.
60?
So someone in my chat told me that maybe it was like a per month stat or something, like from the time
it was probably
period.
something like that.
Per year, maybe per year.
Not per year, because 4,000 over the course of 70 years. That's not like 60 a year.
20? Yeah, I think. Well, let me check. I'll do.
But like, it wasn't a good look. But my point still stood. That like the point was that like the reason why, like, and also I actually, you know, my position is kind of, if we lived in the 1910s, right, and there was like a country, let's say, Norway, right, just a random country, right, liberal democracy. If they had the power to topple the American government and create like a parliamentary system that like liberated Black people, if the Americans didn't like want to fix the problem, right? I'd say, you know, sure, maybe, right? America before like the 80s was a pretty bad place. America, like, for most of its history and even today, like, it's pretty bad. America sucks. Like,
I think you could say that about
America.
I think you could say that about any country.
Doobie,
humanity sucked. Okay, humanity sucked.
No,
there
were
slaves all over the place.
better, that behaved much better than we did.
I love you. Don't. If you are truly patriotic about your nation, you want to see it thrive, right? And do not pull punches when it comes to criticisms of it, right?
I'm not saying we can't criticize, but I don't.
So let's
I mean,
say it.
we
Let's
can't
say
make
it.
it.
America sucks. We need to make it better.
Sure, but it's not like we were the only country, or
Here,
that we're still the only country.
I'm not doing that ifs and buts things. I'm saying, yeah, all right, America has problems. Let's make it better, yeah?
Okay.
Okay, it has problems.
Prime, is it okay?
But really quickly
drag
though,
my friend Roxy into the.
No, fuck Roxy. No, Charlotte, holy crap! You. Wait, actually, I do need to go for a bit, guys. But I just want to say, Patty, Wompt, Nacho, I love you guys. The rest of you, I love you less, but I still love you. Okay.
Thanks, Doobie. Love you too.
Okay, Dobby. It's the first time I thought I was actually going to be in here with you, and you're going to say some shit like that.
Nah, go fuck yourself, dude. Bobby's already gone.
All right, preface. I'm stupid,
Hi, Charlotte,
ignorant, and a little bit drunk. So if I say dumb stuff, that's why.
I'll shout out my window.
I'm giving you advice right
Oh,
now.
yeah.
If you are drunk, do not go live on a Twitch stream.
No, no, no. I'm like tipsy. I'm not.
Hey,
No,
I
you
go.
should
I've
I
been
actually
here
get,
go
before, and I
live
I
wasn't
get
like.
in here a
I,
lot drunk.
I don't think I was that bad. I don't
Universities,
know.
you are not.
You weren't great,
You're not
Reesters.
the.
You weren't great.
Yeah, you're not the pinnacle person to look up to, maybe in that regard.
At least I think
I'm
my
not the
conduct
pinnacle
and
person to
behavior
look up to in any regard.
Yeah, so exactly my point. Don't if you're drunk, don't come in here. I would recommend against
Dr.
it.
K, we've talked plenty of
No,
times.
you should come here when you're drunk.
Yeah,
You
I'm
should definitely do it.
I at least have Charlotte to vouch. I feel like our conversation was okay last time. Like I'm not like.
Yeah,
Oh,
but
wait,
this
it's
time
okay.
you're
I
in front of
belong here.
200 people.
Somebody in chat said they're here for the knowledge. I belong here. For sure.
I mean, people hate everything about my everything, so I'm.
Nah, they don't. Build up some confidence. You'll be
all
fine.
right, all right. We're ready, man. We're ready.
Make your nuts fatter. You'll be all right.
We're ready.
Just like stretch them.
I want those.
Oh, like
South Park
saline
bouncy ball
solution. That's what you
nuts.
gotta do.
Okay.
Don't actually do that, chat. Do not.
Wait, what?
Do it.
Stretch your nuts.
No,
Stretch 'em.
don't
Inject
don't listen to
yourself with
Dr. K's
saline
advice.
solution.
Okay. All right. Maybe not. So.
Hi, Doc. Hi,
Hi,
Prime.
Hey to you. Sorry, delete. If you guys have anything in particular you want to discuss, if there's anything that you guys want to talk about from the last panel, then now's the time to say so.
Yeah, teacher unions are good. Leave them alone.
I would agree.
Yeah, go fuck yourself if you're trying to say like public sector unions are.
We don't have
they're-
teachers
They're
unions
cool,
in the
good, and
South.
keep them.
We've had some teachers.
Oh, yeah, that's
Yes,
teacher
the
union
South,
thing.
the
No.
South is not the
So,
place
Dr.
to
K,
look
what do
to
you
for
think about
inspiration
organized
from labor
education?
laws. What's that?
What do you think about our education system as it currently stands?
Needs
Like, I
improvement.
think people. In what way?
Yeah. I mean, there's several ways. If you want to
Already
go first,
where
Dr.
this
K.
is going.
I would
If you
say,
oppose- I didn't say this earlier, because like it was I was trying to be formal, but like if you oppose teachers unions, like if this was the 1980s, I would have Jimmy Hoffa'd you 100%. Like,
Oh my god.
like
I don't know
if you're a
what that
scab, if you're a
implies.
scab,
Okay,
scabs,
so
scabs get zero fucking.
my
sympathy from
issue
me.
with my education is that it's so decentralized that I don't get the same education as everybody else. Like I was
Yeah,
taught that.
so improvements that need to be made in the United States. One, obviously, there needs to be like true enforcement of this. Like you can't teach falsehoods in school, right? You can't teach evolution, or you can't teach creationism. You can't teach
What's
you know,
falsehood, Dr. K?
That
Okay,
we live on like a land that is from liberty.
Like whatever you disagree with?
No, Womp, you dumb fuck. It's like
Yeah.
what shit is actually verified and what is not, right? Creationism is an opinion or anything, right? Like it's verifiable
so-
that creationism is bunk. And
So
you can't be
hypothetically,
teaching
let's
this factual
say all the
knowledge.
teachers. Let's say all the teachers unions or everyone that was in the teachers
Yeah,
union.
but that's
like,
not going to
majority-
happen. That's not
okay.
the-
You know where I'm going.
not
though.
going to
Like,
entertain a hypothetical that's
Okay,
never going to happen,
okay.
dude.
Oh, how could that never?
That's not
happen?
the
You can't say
point of
never.
hypotheticals.
Sounds like circles now.
It depends on the hypothetical. Some people like to use hypotheticals. to
This could be my only like pushback.
But yeah,
with the
teachers unions
like,
universally produce better results in the classroom, and like trying to compare them to cops
No, K,
is a
Dr.
It's-
K.
but the
K,
same
I
things
brought that
can
up earlier.
happen.
K, I brought that up
The
earlier.
same things
right?
can
And I
happen,
felt
though,
like I
and-
got ignored, right?
Maybe
So we
you
were
didn't
talking.
say
talking about.
happen.
I was trying to talk about like the efficacy of teachers unions, right? And then we got bogged down into like whether or not teachers unions should be able to engage in politics. Which
Yeah,
is, like,
no, you
really
had
dumb
shit
point.
fucks like Doobie on. You ain't gonna have a good conversation with
It
folks
wasn't
like him
Doobie, it
around. He's
was,
coming in bad faith.
But the thing
It
is, like, so
wasn't
we talked
Doobie.
about like
It wasn't Doobie. You just attacked
it
him,
wasn't
Doobie.
Doobie.
It wasn't.
Yeah.
All right, well, whoever.
Dr.
was,
K,
like,
sounds like you
yeah.
got a chip on your shoulder.
Yes.
I do,
So like
but-
it was like they improved performance by like grades by like 7%. They
Mhm.
improved like exam scores. They decreased school size, not school size,
Classroom
size, which
sizes, yeah.
increases school performance of
Yep.
kids because they're able to be like
More
focused on
individual
more.
time, yes.
Yeah, like they get better work hours,
Charlotte, I
better
have a
teacher
question.
pay, better benefits, everything.
So the whole
it's an
state of
all-around
Texas
improvement.
does not have actual teachers unions. They can be fired if they strike. So like, where does that conversation go to like help with southern states
So this is where the federal
right to
government
work
comes in.
laws need to be gotten
Yeah,
rid
so
of,
this
like
is what
this is what
Biden's doing. Biden's doing this right now. So once they, I'm really Biden, please. And the Democrats, if they really truly get rid of the filibuster or reform it to the
Don't
point where
hold
it's
your
no
breath.
longer like a roadblock to legislation or a big roadblock, we're gonna get the PRO Act, right? The Protecting the Right to Organize Act, which will federally abolish right to work laws, right? And it will give work. It will literally slash apart the Taft-Hartley Act, right? The fucking Slaver Act. Back in the day, like it will literally give like unions the ability to expand and people to organize their workplaces like they have never been able to before since like the deal, right? This is going to be an insane policy. Like if the filibuster if the filibuster is destroyed and Biden is able to pass like the 6 bills that have been passed by the House and pass them through the Senate, while Biden's immigration and like my thing on Afghanistan, I think are abject failures and are really morally abhorrent. Since all presidents suck on the scale of presidents, Biden would be really high up there.
No, not really, but
it's early.
Yeah,
you know, I'm not gonna do fucking any Biden dick suck, but this PRO Act seems pretty alright.
No. It's
I
not
don't
just
know if it's been said
PRO
before,
Act. It's
but
the
I
PRO
think
Act.
it'll.
It's the Immigrant Reform Bill. It's the Equality Act. It's the Infrastructure Bill. It's like 5
All
other
right, when he
things that are in the
passes
wait
those,
list
I'll
for the
applaud him
Democrats
for
that-
it. But
have an
until
example of
such
why I
time,
really-
I ain't gonna give him shit.
Example.
No,
for
that's what I
why
just said. I
unions
prefaced it with
would-
if they're able to pass these things, then he will be right. So like,
Yeah,
because like
but he
in such a
hasn't
short
yet,
amount of
so
time,
I'm
he's
not gonna
passed-
give him a hoorah.
No, I'm not either. I'm saying if. I'm literally saying if, dude. Okay,
Yeah,
so like,
if he does it, that's really cool, awesome.
because the point someone said like, oh, in such a short amount of time. Yeah, it's because like, apparently in private, it makes Biden giddy at the thought of being considered like the next FDR, and like it's
Well,
like
yeah,
that's
that's
really
everyone.
exciting because even though I understand that they're not like he's not doing this, he's not altruistic, right? He's Joe Biden. It makes him feel good when he does these things. So it's more likely he's going to keep doing these things, which is good for workers and good for people, right? Slashing if he's known as the person who slashes child poverty in half permanently, right? And that makes him feel good and he wants to do it again, right? Good job, Biden, right?
Yeah,
you
when
made
he
yourself feel
did him
good.
a good job and not before. Now then,
It's just like Trudeau, basically.
yeah, the other big thing that needs to be done away
Progressive than Trudeau.
Wait.
Uh,
So
Okay.
you're
never
saying
mind.
that
I don't
$12
care to do
back.
this comparative bullshit because you know the more progressive is such a floating point term. But anyways, the other thing needs to be done away with is also at will employment, and charter schools are another big sort of road to unionization and improvement in both the classrooms for both students and teachers.
Okay, so I have a question about that. At any of these places, there's going to be a fuck ton of roadblocks. Fuck ton.
There's always going to be. So, like, what's your point?
What things could be torn apart for states' rights versus federal type of stuff, or like what could?
Well, I don't care about states' rights, so.
Well,
I
you
do.
don't.
I think that
the state legislatures do. So
the thing that
like,
if someone was like, "Oh, what about states' rights?" I would just be like, like cope. I don't know. Like, what the fuck? Become a civilized country. I don't know.
Generally, within the context of like teachers for like education, I would agree on Charlotte because like states' rights have historically like fucked over education. Like basically the decentralization of education is a problem, and if you put it on the states levels to produce educational outcomes, like
how is the decentralization of education a problem?
Because you don't have a unified education system, and that also allows for a greater level of disinformation.
why is that worse?
Yeah, why is that worse at all?
Well, like for example, if you're in California, you have you're going to have a generally better level of education as opposed to like my state, Arkansas. Like there's going to be some level of sex education. There's going to be more level of historically accurate information. Like in Arkansas, like fundamentally is like education is sucks.
I mean, so you
can't compare.
Is that
all right?
So hold on, I think one second. I think
so why can't you have different education styles?
Because the point of education is to be the great equalizer.
Yeah, Womps. I think what Womps is referring to, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Womps, and my computer is now slowing down. That's fine. But you're talking about something different than like simply standards of education. You're talking about recreating the system to something completely differently, right? So could you describe exactly what you mean by decentralizing education? Like, what would that look like?
Me?
No, wants.
Well,
you guys
so
know
I don't see any value in standardized.
Yeah, we know.
So I don't see any value in a standardized system. Like, to have the same education given to every single person is of very little value. If they all get different educations, we'll be far better off as a result.
What does that actually mean, though? What does that actually mean?
Germany.
So I have a.
Hold on 1 second. I just want to narrow in because we're going to be arguing about different things here, right? So I'm trying to understand what exactly Womp is saying. So are you simply saying like individualized, like to the child? Is that what you're saying? Because I think lots of people are in favor of that. What exactly do you mean by this?
So I'm more interested in. I would like the educational facilities to be independently developed.
They are.
And provide a diversity of educational options.
Yes, they do.
Yes,
they will continue to do.
They don't.
But we have an issue there with standardization, don't we?
Okay, but you're confused about standardization there. So let me
he's
explain.
right. He's right. He's not wrong though. Like,
no, let me explain. Okay, so I agree that local situations are going to require, to an extent, different development of institutions, but fundamentally my argument here is not about how the institutions develop, but the quality of education and the information that is taught. That is my argument. That's my focus. Because what happens is we have right now is the amount of information that we're taught and the level of educational quality is vastly different across different states and different counties and different cities. Like we have several states that like fundamentally teach like the Civil War as like a war of northern aggression versus like Civil War, like the control of like slaves and stuff. So like that's a fundamental issue with decentralized educational right now. But if we have the like educational quality standards, like the level of interpretation is going to differ in terms of institutional development. But if you have
what do you mean by that?
Like, well, for example, like if you have California, you're going to have different days and probably different levels of organization generally, and like how many people are going to be on like part of the board or something.
Not really, no. Compared to like, I mean, I don't. I'd have to pull up research, but generally, like a state board of education is that, and then I have my local board at least. That's all I know of it as.
Yeah, and that's one of the worst aspects of education, the education system. So like this really shows its head. So we can get into like the all the different subjects, particularly history and how it's taught in different states.
Oh yeah.
Particularly about the Civil War. But the biggest thing we should get into is how sex education is taught on the state, the county, and then the school district, and then the school level. There's very little regulation in very many states, mostly red states, right? There is no standardization in a lot of places from school to school. And so you have a bunch of kids who get pregnant, don't understand how to use protection, are wholly ignorant on a bunch of different subjects regarding sex education. And then you have some kids, like kids from California and New York, who fucking, their brains are fucking massive. They know everything about fucking sexual education, all
They're
that
all
stuff. But then you have
washed.
someone from like Oregon, who is not Oregon, because I found out I guess Oregon's more blue than I thought, but like Nebraska, right? Who like the kid will be like, oh, like, you know, we're just supposed to not have sex, like until we're married.
Yeah, I was taught that in Texas.
Oh yeah, I got one of those
And like
cards.
the data is clear, right? There's like recently there was a
Abstinence is the only
meta-analysis, right? Abstinence only education literally just makes teenagers get pregnant and get diseases. That's all it does. Doesn't bring you closer to God.
What age do you think would be a good age to start teaching kids about sex education?
So like this is so like you teach different stuff in different stages, and you repeat it over because they're very short courses, and you don't have to go over it very much and very long. You don't have to have like an entire semester about it. So like for me, I started learning sex ed in like the 5th grade.
Holy
right?
shit, really?
And like I think even earlier is better because the thing is, that people say like, oh, you're like ruining the kids or something, but the point is that like knowledge can't hurt children, right?
Mhm.
Like I guess some knowledge because it makes them scared. But like specifically this kind of education, there's no evidence that like teaching a third grader like what a penis is or like what a vagina is harmful to them. If anything, it just makes them more aware because I don't know if you guys know this, there are 10, 11-year-olds who have sex and get pregnant, and it's horrible. It's it's so scary. Can you imagine having an 11-year-old get pregnant? I can't even
with
fucking
an
fathom,
with an
like
11-year-old penis? No, I can't. That's weird.
Red Charlie,
Like,
can
got you there.
There's also
I mean, I wouldn't be confident in my 11-year-old penis. I don't know what kind of
Universe,
hog these
please
guys are
shut the
packing.
fuck up, dude. I'm begging you.
For me, my like prescribe what I prescribe the curriculum is just like, you know, in like 3rd grade, in the 5th grade, and then 8th grade, and then like 10th, and then like 12th grade or whatever. Like you go more advanced and more specific, whatever. And specifically, one thing I do advocate for is LGBT sex education and teach it to everyone. Because the thing is, right, while not everyone will need to use it, you know, having that information will not hurt you, right? It'll also help dispel
Normalizes
certain
as well.
stigmas
And quit
and
using
like
the term Native
stereotypes about gay
American, too.
people.
We've all
And also
internalized
like
that.
the kids who are LGBT, either that don't know it yet or are in the closet, will feel less alienated, be more informed, and will, you know, not get STDs and die, right? So that's good.
Well, also, oh, sorry, just one thing. Like, one thing I've noticed crazy throughout this whole country is that, like, everybody's okay with saying the term Native American, which is just, like, it's despicable. Like, it's terrible why everybody's internalized and been okay with First Nations and Indigenous people being called this. But I get it's from my local school's
Can you
fault.
explain why?
So the term like Native American is like a byproduct of white settler colonialism. So like when you call somebody native to the land that you raped and culturally genocided them from, the name that it's not called they're native to, it's kind of like that. The only difference between First Nations and Native Americans is that one's in Canada, one's in in America. Just up there, we recognize at least that it was wrong to call that sort of thing that.
Are you native?
Me?
Yeah.
No.
Okay. So how do you like actually know that this is an offensive term?
I mean, you could probably listen to a bunch of people who are indigenous talk about it.
Yeah,
I've already tried to look.
British.
I've literally tried
Hold
to
on.
look into this topic before.
Yeah.
There are no polls. The only thing you'll
Exactly.
find are some anecdotes about like people talking about how the farther you get away from reservations, the less people call them Indian.
Exactly. So like
Why
I
does
work
the whole
with
country,
I work
Canada,
with
not call them Native American?
I work with Inuk people, Inuktitut, or people who live up in Nunavut, and
Mhm.
none of them. This is anecdotal because obviously your evidence
They're
for this is
Inuit, right?
anecdotal. It's going to be anecdotal because there's no polling on this. So they identify as Inuk. It's hard to say it. Their language is really hard. Inuktitut, or they come from Nunavut. So they identify as Inuit. They also identify as native. They say that I'm native.
Yeah, Inuit would be the proper term for people up there.
Inuk is the proper term.
Well, for the
So-
classification of like indigenous
Yeah.
people in the Arctic.
So essentially, you kind of just seem to want to get into like this semantical debate, right? You're trying to get into semantics as
it's
far
not
as
even
possible.
that. It's like
but you don't have any actual
education
evidence. You don't have any actual evidence to claim that native people do not like being called native.
This reminds me of the discussion on like whether to call someone Hispanic or Latin or Latinx, right?
No, I mean
no,
she's right, or I don't want to sorry.
Yeah. So it reminds me of that discussion.
But
And
literally,
people
I've been
think so. Hold on. There's like not an actual, because not surprising, the Latin community is a diverse community with lots of different thoughts on this. There isn't a consensus like at all, right? And so now it's popular within like progressive communities to use like Latinx, right? But if you ask Latin people, and some actually went out and did those polls, right? A lot of them, like, first of all, they haven't even heard of that, or they don't want to be called that. They want to be called something else. So I just to say that Native American is inherently
a criticism of our school system, because in Canada, like I was educated on some of the most conservative people I know on why I shouldn't say the term Native American to First Nations people there. That's where my point well. I don't have data to back it up or crap like that, but I didn't even know I lived on Wichita territory until somebody educated me.
Yeah, and it's great that you found out you live on Wichita territory, right? But like Canada's not the only country in the world. And the other thing about this too,
We're one of the only ones that recognizes at least our cultural genocide of First Nations people.
I'm aware. And so, but the other thing, well, you know, you guys would actually, if you stop like fucking telling Inuk people whether they can wear fur or not, wouldn't you? So like the other thing is this, is that your criticism about schools, right? Now, like I understand the criticisms about like public schools, which is true. Public schools are pretty fucking shit in the United States.
Yeah.
I don't know how it is in Canada, but like
I went to school in
people
Texas,
learning,
so I
people
grew up in
calling
Texas.
people Native American is not one of them. Like one of the biggest problems I have, I'm sorry to say, one of the biggest problems I have with some leftists and progressives is that you guys focus on the wrong fucking thing. And someone calling someone native is not one of them things to worry about.
No, you're right. He is focusing on the wrong thing.
Okay, so
I
let's
was
move
focusing on
on.
something that I haven't learned
Hey,
in school.
buddy,
and that was it.
it's red. It's okay. Let's move on.
Alright.
So I think another quality, besides just sex education itself, is also I lost my train of thought. So if somebody else wants to take up the reins, I'll get back to my point.
Okay, so
Yeah, oh, you can go.
oh, it's kind of weird to like adjudicate, especially.
Wait, can I clarify my point really quick?
Oh
My whole
boy,
thing
hold
was,
on,
like,
stop.
I don't
No,
know
thanks.
anything.
Thanks, stop. So it's kind of weird to try to adjudicate this just about like native people. Just like I don't know. It's like not that big of a deal. And something we have to focus on. But I thought there was an interesting. Oh wait a minute, 1 second. Thank you. Thank you so much, Riley Grace Rochon, for being so kind as to rate us. Thank you so much. 177 people. That's really, really kind of you, Riley. And Riley,
Riley.
I would love to get you on the channel one day. I don't think we've managed to do that yet. But Riley, if you would like to come on, definitely would want to reach out and make that happen. But to Riley's people, to her community, thank you for being here. My name is Prime. This is my channel. Right now we're having an open walk-on panel with members of my audience. If you want to be a part of it, you can. Exclamation point open. Let you know exactly how to do that. So we had these panels, talk about all kinds of stuff. We had a closed panel just a little while ago. That was a lot of fun. If you missed that, it was really, really good. Definitely something you should check out. And we do these all the time. We give you content 6 days a week. We have content 6 days a week here. And we have we gather a lot of interesting people. We'll talk about fascinating topics. Oh, fascinating. The topics that I come up with. And they're usually pretty fun. So if you want more of that, please, again, hit that follow button, hit the notification bell so you know I'm going live. We do it all the time. And we even have a game show on Saturday, Primetime Morale. So we give you all kinds of content here. I think you'll really enjoy it if you give it a chance. So please, please, please hit that follow button, hit that notification bell right now, so you don't forget, so you know I'm going live. But thank you again, Riley. I'm not sure if you're around to still listen to me, but thank you seriously for being so kind as to raid the channel. And welcome to all of our audience members. Okay. Back at it. So we were talking about
schools.
Schools and states' rights. I thought that was really interesting. I just thought that was really interesting what Charlotte mentioned about the.
Oh, so I remember my points now. If you want me to keep going, Prime.
On points on what? Because I kind of want to
bouncing off of like the sex education itself.
Okay, sure.
Yeah. So there's also some measure of like teaching children about all these different qualities of the like physical interactions. Like a lot of children are abused sexually, and by giving them the tools to understand that, they can more effectively like communicate that to the people who are adults, and this way they can tell they are being abused. There's also
teaching about consent.
Yeah, like consent. Like the idea is like basically. I'm of the mind that we should start teaching consent even younger. Like if a person does not want you to touch them at all, you should recognize when they communicate that. Like we're taught like boys will be boys. Like if pulling a girl's pigtails in like kindergarten is like a thing that's just going to happen. Like that's an example of what occurs if we have fundamentally these communication of consent. Like I didn't learn about consent until I was in fucking college. and that's a problem itself. And we need to have those fundamental education methods in there because we can teach people how to be like healthy human beings, interacting with each other healthily, and it's also going to teach like people to rape less.
I'll be
rape less, right? Yeah.
Yeah,
I
don't know about all
haven't
that,
gotten
but-
rid of all the raping, but I've been raping less lately, so it's been
Well, even when I went to University of
That's
Arkansas,
I'm actually
Jesus
curious.
Christ, dude.
I'm actually curious about that. So, like, you
I'm not.
said to teach
I don't
people.
that in the closet.
You said
Keep that skeleton deep in the closet, baby.
Okay, universe.
I don't want to hear about it.
You mentioned to teach people to rape less, right? But and I totally understand. I understand the like the not all men thing, right? So you didn't know that if someone says no to sex, you back off?
No. What I'm saying is there, like, for example, there's often the idea in our society that we're taught, like, if, you know, like, we see, like, signs and it's, like, it's okay. But the problem comes is we need to have a defined communication method for people to communicate to each other, like, hey, I like you like me, do you want to have sex? And then from there, there's that clear, definite communication. We don't need to rely on like these body language or like social cues in those scenarios, because the social cue scenarios are not going to be as well defined. But if we have like defined communication, that makes it a much more effective means of people communicating needs and desires.
Yeah. So you learned more about communication, not necessarily consent.
We're creating a defined means of consent instead of like an insubstantial social cue situation.
When I went to the University of Arkansas, we had to take a video on what is tea, and no, screw Arkansas, I hate that place.
I go here, but I just was relating.
Oh no, I'm relating as well. So we had to take the tea video and all that. When I went to school in Canada, that wasn't a thing. I advocated for it, and I wasn't allowed because there wasn't enough proof to show that like this little video worked against proactively stopping sexual assault and stuff like that. It's literally just something you do at your what do you call it, orientation or before your classes, and it's like, what is tea and blah blah blah. And I wanted to implement
what is tea? I don't understand why you're referring to tea.
It's a video with a cup of tea explaining and analogizing.
Okay, so it's like tell, empathize, whatever.
No,
like
it's
that,
you
right?
don't need tea when the person doesn't want tea. It was this little cartoon. Everybody had.
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
But I wasn't allowed. This is an example where I don't know data, but it wasn't allowed to go through on the Canadian university end because they're like, we don't actually know if this like works. Like,
so
Works is very subjective.
I would say to
we've had the consent debate on here before, and I don't really want to do that again.
I would say to you, Patty, that in terms of consent, that some people do need to be taught that no means no, right? Because in our media landscape, you know, you'll have situations where, you know, people get messages that no is the start of the negotiation, you know, rather than it not being, saying like, okay, I don't want to be a part of this, and that's okay, that's valid, and move on or something else, right? So yeah, we actually do need to get those messages out.
It's not that I don't think that kids need to do not need to be taught consent. I absolutely do think kids need to be taught consent, but I think that people who are rapists or people who are adults and they don't take no for an answer, I think they're well aware of what no means. And it's not a matter of if they were taught consent. It's a matter of the fact that this is a person who psychologically does not care about the concept of no. So these are people who, for example, what's the guy who assaulted, and I don't know if he raped, but I know he sexually assaulted a girl behind a dumpster, and he got off really, Brock Turner. So Brock Turner is a very smart kid, and he understands the concept of no. He was probably taught concepts associated with consent, like most kids his age. Maybe, I'm not sure. But he knows the concept of no. In knowing that he knows the concept of no, this was displayed even in court. It was pretty clear he understands those concepts. it's not about understanding the concept for him. It's the fact that denying the no that he was given brings him great power. And that's the problem with rapists. They know what no means, but denying that someone said no brings them great power, and it brings them great personal satisfaction.
Didn't Brock Turner's dad, though, make a comment about drunk people and sex or something? And it was like, oh, she was just drunk, whatever, blah, 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 blah.
Yeah, his parents aren't good role models either.
I think that's a little bit problematic in an argument because, like, the issue that happens is like rapists have a lot of distinguishing factors and conditions in which they're going to be rapists themselves. Like, there's also like the people who engage it for the power play, but there's also like other factors that are going to significantly like affect the power play itself. Like, for example, the ideas of individual autonomy. The idea of consent goes into the person's autonomy, the autonomy of body, the autonomy of freedom from harassment, of physical assault, sexual assault. What the idea is there is if you teach these fundamental concepts at a younger age, and if you instill it into the schemas of the person, you are fundamentally reinforcing that fact. And you are like,
I agree. I'm saying that rapists don't abide by this even when they get older.
But what happens is if you teach that itself, you are going to increase the likelihood that they're going to engage in that behavior. You're going to potentially prevent rapists occurring.
So
I'm not sure if that's necessarily true.
So I guess I would respond to you, Patty. And first of all, I just want to take a quick moment to welcome our new people. Then I want to respond to Patty. Thank you, Rox, for being here. Really appreciate you coming through. Rox is your name, right? I thought it was.
Yeah, Rox. Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you for being here. Thank you, Mitch, for being here. We had a person named Paul who's gone. I don't know. But yeah, I guess they're gone. Never mind. Yeah, I guess it's everyone that I missed. But so to Patty, I would say the goal is there'll always be people who will have a criminal mindset, right? And some people will use that criminal mindset to steal from others, right? To or to scam others, or right? And some people will use that criminal mindset to take the bodily autonomy away of someone else. Why did someone move? Sorry, something's happening behind the scenes. I don't know what's going on. Okay, so some people will do that, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like that's the goal is to change the general mindset, right, around these things. So for instance, if there's women, like someone at a party who's inebriated, right, like and like a group of guys like gather around her, like these men should know, hey, this woman is not to be touched, she cannot consent, right, and we leave it alone, right? There might be one of those guys who might think he should go farther, but then if we put this mindset out there, this general education mindset out there about consent, or however you want to define that, then they can step in. Hey, knock it off, buddy. That's not cool, right? But if they don't know, then a lot of people may stand around and watch it happen. We've seen this. We've seen exactly this. Right?
I don't disagree. I don't disagree with that. The problem is so like I don't disagree with any of that, and I don't disagree with the teaching of consent. I don't disagree with making people aware about things such as rape culture. That's not stuff that I disagree with. The problem is that when people when people say this, but they say it in encouragement that like if we do this, rapes will go down, molestations will go down. I'm not sure if that's necessarily true, because it's not the teaching of consent that's necessarily the problem, but rather the fact that, and here's the other thing is like in multiple countries, including this one, the United States, they've had to implement what's called Good Samaritan laws. These are essentially things like everyone here knows that hitting someone and murdering someone is wrong. But we still implement Good Samaritan laws because there's been multiple cases in which in the midst of someone being murdered, in fact, we just had a recent case, the guy was carjacked. Nobody stopped him. They just pulled out their phones and video recorded it, and he died at the end. He ended up getting killed and died. So the issue is that like, the issue is I think it's the argumentation for me, right? It's not necessarily implementing these things because I agree with them. But the argumentation of, oh, if we do this and the rapes will go down, the murders will go down, et cetera, et cetera, I think you're setting yourself up for like huge amounts of psychological failure.
Are you saying
In what way?
Is what you're trying to say maybe that the people? I think I understand what you're trying to say. Is that the people who are most likely to commit these acts are people who this education won't work on? That like these are
the education is this helps perfectly in things like court, because if they're taught this education, it's that they know that it's wrong to do so, but psychologically they don't care. So what I'm saying is that when someone makes an argument for implementing these measures, it shouldn't be about, look, the rapes will go down. No, you're just setting everyone up for like a really bad time when the rapes keep going. It should be just to hold these people extra accountable.
But how do you determine who's held extra accountable if a person hasn't committed a rape yet?
We know after
Okay,
that.
yeah, and I agree that we should hold them greater accountability. But fundamentally, is we can have people commit less rapes. It's about prevention in that instance. Like I would say the prevention.
Say that one more time.
Like, because what happens if we prevent the rapes from occurring in the first place? That is a greater
yeah,
focus
but what
in that
she's saying is
situation.
you can't do that because you don't. People that commit these actions are wired differently. Their brains are wired differently. They don't. It's not like they learned it. I mean, some people were, they grew up in horrible households and they just had this psychological trauma. But that's a rewiring of your brain. Normal people don't do this shit. They know that that's just it's just something you don't do.
Nobody's wired this way.
Things should still be taught. No, the things
for
should
sure
still
there
be
are.
taught,
For sure
because
there
like
are.
there are
There are
incidences
people who
in
are
so-called
just
regular people doing things that actually violate consent. Like those things should absolutely be taught. I guess what would make me back down from what I'm saying right now is if someone provided me ample evidence that shows when these measures are put in place in which people are taught consent, then rapes, molestation, and sexually taking advantage of people who are inebriated or whatever have actually gone down, whether it be college campuses or actual areas in which consent has been taught to schools and people and communities. Like, I will back down from this position, but my only position on this really is that I think people are setting a bar really high and just expecting, and then like ending up like what happened, like they end up with like psychological failure because they thought the result of teaching this would be, oh, the rapes are all going down.
Patty, I have something for you. So I literally looked up, like, I've never looked up this topic. I've actually never thought about this. I was like,
yeah,
why haven't I ever thought about like look into like, has someone done a study on this or whatever? The first thing that comes up is undergraduate women who took a sexual education classes before college were half as likely to be sexually assaulted in college, according to a recent study by Columbia University, compared to undergraduate students who received abstinence-only education and saw no reduction in rate of assault. So basically, I think it's like when you give people the tools to recognize when they're in trouble, they're more likely to avoid that trouble.
Yeah. Now, what I want to know if this applies to the victimizers, not the not the victim.
My intuition.
Yeah.
Obviously we have to look into this more, but my intuition is people aren't biologically rapists. That's kind of like weird to like assert.
No, I don't think people are biologically
rapists. That's what the universe.
I feel like it would be hard to track
that. They're wired differently. That like, oh, I'm built different. I'm built to rape.
I
wasn't saying
people,
only people that are wired differently, but I think you have to be like, you have to go through, like, even the Brock guy. I'm not saying anything good about the motherfucker, but he was raised probably in a very wealthy home where he didn't really get taught the word no. So that wires your brain to really not think, like, you don't think about the word no as like a real thing. It's not like if he went to school and they were like, oh yeah, don't do this. Where he spends most of his life is at home, and where he gets most of his teachings is at home. And if his dad is saying shit like, oh, boys will be boys, he's drunk, that just shows the kind of upbringing these people have. I'm not saying that only like the craziest people rape. There's a lot of fuck ass people that do shit that's just wrong because they want to take advantage.
Yeah,
but
I feel like it would be really hard to track this too, just because like not a lot of people are going to admit like, oh yeah, I would. Well, thankfully I had that class, or I would have just been out here raping everybody. Like, it's kind of the same problem we have with like people like to ask like, well, can you prove how many like crimes are stopped by police, or like, you can't really prove that completely because just a cop sitting on the side of the road could have
maybe it's
prevented
possible to
something, and
measure it,
it's
like,
not like
if-
someone's going to come out and say like, oh yeah, I was going to commit a crime, but I saw that cop there like in a survey or something.
This argument
or you
really
can
only
measure
oh,
the
go on.
level of sexual education that rapists and sexual assaulters have compared to the general population, and maybe that could give you some sort of indicator, maybe not like definitive,
Yeah.
but it could give some sort of like some sort of like that there's like some indication that if people know more information, they are less likely to do bad things.
I don't believe so. I've been
So I just googled it and I just googled it and a review found that the majority of sexual assault preventative interventions, which were designed at deterring people from committing sexual assault, found that there was some positive effect on deterring sexual assault. So there is evidence to suggest that the majority of programs designed at deterring such behavior has a positive impact on preventing people from engaging in such behavior.
I have a question for those things. So my thing is anecdotal and take it how you want, but frat houses are one of the worst environments I've ever seen for this stuff. Like UARC, like SEC frats are some of the worst places. These dudes are educated on this and it flies under the radar.
Despicable.
So it's a big issue. I feel like I don't want to generalize, but I feel like that is a thing. At least I've seen it and it goes unreported and not a thing said. So I don't know like how
I don't even think it's a college environment. It's just not even a frat house thing. The whole college scene in general is pretty disgusting
shit.
when it comes. It's
Disgusting.
horrible.
It's horrible.
Yeah.
Hey, can I say
For
something
rape
real
and
quick?
murder, it's really bad.
Yeah, I just need to say something real quick. Hey, what's this dude's name? Life on the Couch, whatever your name is. Like, if you actually think I'm not saying anything, you're welcome to come on and teach me a lesson. You're welcome to come on and say something of value.
She's got data. Beware.
I like that spirit, Patty. I love that spirit right there. That's good.
So I just wanted to offer like.
So hold on, one second.
A tangent from like what we were talking about earlier.
1 second before you do that. Hold on, before you do that. There's
Okay,
people who want to jump in on this particular topic before we tangent.
It's still on the sex education in schools though. So.
Okay, all right. We'll get back to you in a second. Hold on. I just want to make sure there's some people who haven't gotten a chance. So you were trying to say something, Paul, and Paul, welcome to the channel. Also, after that we'll go to Mitch, and then we'll go to Nacho.
Yeah, I was just saying that I think the whole college scene in general is very disgusting in the way it handles rape and murder crimes in general. Like even at prestigious and good colleges, it's pretty fucking bad.
Yeah.
Like, and it goes under the radar. Like at Harvard in the last, like, I think it was, well, like 9 years or some shit, there was like 2 murders on the campus. It was pretty fucked.
Okay.
The whole
Can I speak to the
tolerance
college
level
thing?
of this shit is pretty bad. That was all.
So let's go to Mitch, Rocks, Mitch, Nacho, then Rocks. Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Prime. One big thing here, in terms of the argument that like rapists already know that they're evil or whatever, and they have this like mindset, that's only true for certain forms of like sexual assault as well. So like, of course, someone that say roofies someone, they know that they're not going to consent there.
Mute yourself. Universities, we can hear you typing like really loudly. If you can mute yourself, please. Go ahead, Mitch, please. Go ahead.
Yeah. So with other forms of sexual assault, that's the thing. Like as Prime mentioned earlier, an example I really like is some people believe that when you say no, that's actually inviting you to negotiate, because that's true for other non-sexual encounters. This is also true for say someone that asks someone to have sex, maybe pressures them a little bit, and then they say yes, even though they're not actually into it. That's also a form of sexual assault, right? So like the thing is, it is universally true, I suppose, to someone to say roofies someone might have that like evil brain or whatever, but it's entirely possible that some people that might otherwise not be evil or might not even know that they're raping somebody might participate in these actions because they don't fully understand like what consent is or how consent needs to be gotten. I suppose is a big thing as well.
Okay. Let's go to Nacho, then Rocks, then Rage.
So just something I was thinking about earlier before we got to past it, but like the whole teaching the sex education, because I've like changed my position a little bit on it. I guess it's like I'm more conflicted about it now. I guess because my opinion is that we should be encouraging parents to be teaching their kids about these things, but then I also understand that you come from a single parent household who maybe doesn't have as much time or whatever, or your kids aren't because normally it's like there's some kind of interaction that happens and then you're like, okay, we're gonna have the talk. But but then also I read a study that was talking about how when kids are taught sex ed, when they get to that grade, there tends to be a lot of kids who come out and like report sexual abuse because they didn't know it was a sexual act before. So it's like obviously we want more of those things happening. Like this is why I said it's kind of tangent to this. It's like we want these things seem to be preventative, like so it's kind of like a necessary. I mean, it's not really property. It's not really evil, but it's like just that term. Like it's kind of a necessary evil. Like it's better to teach it than to not, I guess. So.
Okay. Let's go to Rocks, then Rage, then Wordy.
So a lot of people are speaking in regards to like college campuses are just like hellholes. Trust me, I know. I go to college. Fuck frat bros. But this study in particular, it specifically looked at programs that targeted the people who would commit sexual assaults on college campuses with programs that had components like challenging like gender stereotypes, increasing empathy for rape survivors, providing information on the effects of rape, things that are specifically targeted in dissuading people from engaging in sexual violence. And there is a positive impact that this study finds. It isn't perfect. It doesn't solve the problem, but there is a net benefit to these programs, as we can empirically see.
Okay. Rage, then Wordy.
All right. Pretty much agree with most of the people on the panel that knowledge is definitely important. More knowledge that we give to kids about consent, about understanding what's happening with their bodies, with other people's bodies, and all that jazz. With regards to campuses, it's always been weird to me that like there's campus police and then like there's other police and something. Not that they don't take things seriously on campus. Sometimes they don't, but it stuck when I did go to university and I was living on campus. Something that was really weird to me was they don't report everything to like the official agencies. Like if there are certain situations that happen on campus and they like, keep it on campus because I guess there's like a sort of they don't want to I guess it's sort of people. Some people see it as like a training ground. They don't want to treat the students to the fullest extent of the law. But I think that lets people get away with things. I know specifically they were doing it with like underage drinking, which I mean, maybe we should change the drinking age as long as people are consenting that um, as it is. But people would do things on campus, get in trouble, but you only get like a slap on the wrist because it's like, oh, you're just a kid going to school. But I think that having a culture where we send a bunch of people to a place and then we treat them with kid gloves, even though they're actually they're adults at this point, is not necessarily good for creating a good environment. Like
They need more kids' gloves, actually. So whenever I was friends with my German foreign exchange students, they fucking hated the school here. They do pass fail depending on the degree route you're taking in Germany. I'll Google statistics for the stats people, but to my knowledge, that is a lot better for creating like research teams and stuff like that. It's not as stressful. You learn to work together instead of this bullshit where I pay $5,000 and then it's like have to take 3 tests and that's my fucking grade. Like it doesn't learn shit.
Well, okay, like grading schemes and like your educational material, that's a kind of a different topic than interpersonal. Like essentially, we're talking about violence, like rape and sexual assault. So I think
shut up.
So I think treating people with kid gloves in terms of grading that might be a totally different conversation. But in terms of if somebody does sexual assault on campus, I do think that they should be held accountable. Like that. I mean, on this panel, I believe everybody pretty much agrees with that.
Very brave stance.
But there are some systems where we have people who advocate for not prosecuting people on that, saying okay, there was just a kid, he just made a mistake, let's move on. I know like that Brock Turner case, his father was trying to get him off the hook because this is he got his whole future ahead of him, and like I think that mindset
He's such a good swimmer.
that mindset is in that mindset's in our society, and we gotta get rid of that. There was one other thing that I wanted to we can just continue. I forgot the other thing.
Hey,
Wordy.
Prime, can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah, sure.
Can you let my boy? Are we allowed to say the N word?
Yeah. I mean, sure, you are, but yeah. But
Okay, can you let my nigga Big Dude come in here? He will not disappoint you. I promise. I
okay,
promise.
all right.
As long as he's
What a great name, Big Dude.
I have a question about that, and not a
But he will say the N word a lot. So if he's
That's
not
fine.
allowed to,
No, it's fine.
okay.
No, it's fine.
I have a
He's
not
black,
Destiny
who cares?
question on that. But what if
Jesus Christ, is that my introduction?
Yes.
Sorry. One at a time. Hold on. Wordy, please go ahead.
All right. So, Patty, let me ask you one quick question, and then I'm going to follow up. So you would agree that rape is caused primarily by a large series of socialization, right?
Say that question again.
Would you agree that rape is primarily caused by socialization?
I'm gonna have to ask you what you mean by that.
People are taught the ideas of not taught the ideas of consent, individual autonomy, and they're all socialized into these ideas of aggressing against a person's own body and everything isn't necessarily a bad thing.
Not necessarily. I don't think that people are. I don't think for the most part people are actively taught to violate people's autonomy or the wills of people, such as if someone says no. I don't think that there's this large grouping of people. So rape is a psychological thing. It's not even about getting off, or it's not even about it's a psychological thing in which someone is imposing their power onto yours for psychological gratification. Now,
It's
this
like
isn't
castrating
necessary.
rapists doesn't work. It's because they don't rape people
Yes,
for sexual gratification.
exactly. This isn't because they're taught to do so, but there is a psychological component about them in which, for some reason, they reach gratification through these means, but it's not necessarily sexual. So when you say that, what you're essentially saying to me is that rape is taught. And I don't think that that actually is the case. I think that for some people, like for example, Donald Trump, I think Donald Trump was taught that in order for him to achieve things in the world, he needs to take it. And he probably has raped someone at some point. But that would be an individual in which I would say that these behaviors are taught. Now, when you have other individuals like say for example Bundy, right? Bundy grew up in a very well-off family, and yet he went around and there was no evidence to claim that his father told him to go out and brutalize women, and yet this individual went out and brutalized dozens of women and raped them.
Okay,
Is this something he was taught? No.
I think there's a confusion here.
Okay.
So I'm not arguing that people are taught to rape. I'm saying the absence of education, fundamentally of individual autonomy and consent, is what
I think
causes
there's
rape.
I think this is both things going on. Now,
Yes,
I
yes,
think
I
that
can
when,
agree that there's some psychological thing, but you would
here's
have
what
to
here's what I'll concede to you on, right? Is that society not punishing rapists or being lenient with rapists helps encourage other people with these psychological this is going to be the bad phrasing, but with these psychological norms within them, to think that it's easier for them to get away with it. I agree. I would agree that this is something that would be taught or encouraged by society in which people think they can get away with it. But this isn't just as simple as saying it's taught or it's genes. This is a both things going on that helps push each other.
but basically what I'm saying here is that social conditions create the psychology. Because people are not taught these fundamental ideas, they're more likely to have this psychological perspective. And because of that, they are more likely to engage in rape. And so what happens is you can look at individual actors of rape committing, but fundamentally, if you look at the systematic issue of rape, it's the socialization that comes into it, because there's the power dynamics that come into it. Women are put into lesser levels of power compared to men, and different more different power disparities, different inequalities amongst gender, and all these different factors fundamentally all play into the psychology of engaging in power play that makes
Yeah, and
people engage in that behavior.
I'm not saying that that's not something going on, but what I am saying is that to me, it sounds like what I am saying to me, it sounds like that you're trying to kind of you're trying to kind of bring it down all to that, and I don't think that it's just all that.
I'm not saying
if I
it's all
could,
bad, but I'm saying a significant representation of the issue here is in that itself. And because of that, if we address
How much is
that,
what do you mean by like significant? How much is significant?
I'd have to look at statistics myself and like
Okay.
studies on it in generally, but I would make the argument those are like a statistical, like a significant indicator of why it happens. Because of that, if we address that issue and then we also reinforce like greater consequences, therefore breaking the cycle, this way we can significantly decrease the amount of rape that occurs.
So
This would have to be this is once again just comes down to the numbers in which we would have to see from studies already done about and this isn't just for women, right? This isn't about women being aware, but rather do victimizers actually back off more when they are confronted with this type of information and teachings. So it would have to come back down to the numbers.
Want to read that study right now?
I'm pretty sure Red Charlotte cited that study.
Red Charlotte cited a study concerning a study concerning the victims, not the victimizers.
Well, Rox.
I cited a study that was targeting the victimizers. It specifically looked at programs that were. I can.
Okay. So, my favorite person in the whole world, Jill the Solicitor, has shown up, and she wanted to talk on the specific issue. So I want to give her the time because she's not going to be here very long. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think college is a very specific environment because it actually changes the realities of rape culture significantly. Like if you look at rape generally and sexual assault generally, it's most likely by someone that you know and you're close to, and it's most likely a one-off thing. Like recidivism isn't regular. Whereas in university life, most sexual assaults are committed by serial perpetrators. Serial perpetrators are most likely to be aligned with fraternities or aligned with sports teams, and the people who are most likely to be victims are unaligned freshman women. This shows the importance of social capital in these situations and how they create an environment that allows women to be more victimized. Also, there's a lot of alcohol involved in university life, which is shown to be often involved in sexual assault. Now, there are some other issues, of course, just in terms of where you're at in your stage of life when you're at university. For a lot of people, they're just starting to date. These are their first relationships. They're learning about themselves. They're learning how to treat other people. And that's where I have some issue with universities dealing with rape and sexual assault internally. Because while I agree that some of you have said, oh, yeah, well, we don't want to let people off with kid gloves. We want to make sure that people are held to account. Justice is only justice if the way that you determine what happens is also just. And I think actually there are a lot of instances where people have been denied due process by Title IX because, you know, two people were dating, they were sleeping together, they were drunk, they break up. 9 months later, someone says it wasn't consensual. The person who was accused has a slightly less believable story than the person who did the accusing, and that person is expelled from university. That has a lifelong that has lifelong consequences, just as being raped would have lifelong consequences. But we do need to be careful that we're not creating new victims. And I think consent is just generally a fucking shit, horrible way to look at sex at all, unless you are literally a lawyer in a courtroom prosecuting a case, because this is part of the problem. It should be about reciprocity and respect and being engaged with your partner and actually knowing that they're enjoying themselves, because all research shows that both men and women are incredibly capable at gauging non-verbal refusal. And when someone isn't into it, the only time that men scale down in terms of when they're able to read these signs is when researchers have added the domain of accountability into the discussion. Then suddenly, oh my God, they don't know what a no is. But yeah, I think consent, and I'm so annoyed that so many campus rape policies have been built around consent, because it just isn't enough to counter the problems that we see when we know about social capital, alcohol, and the stage of life that people are at.
This is why this was a huge Twitter discourse a few months ago. People are really mad at the SOCDEMs for wanting to impose an alcohol tax of like doubling it, and currently it's like 2%, so it would be like 4%, and it would decrease, I think, like alcohol deaths by like 35% or something. I can't even imagine what that would do to like to sexual assaults or whatever.
Hmm.
I mean, I would presume that like university students, what isn't going to stop them from drinking for the most part isn't going to be like.
But it will
enforcement
stop them from
mechanisms.
drinking just enough collectively that there's going to be a measurable difference in the amount of people harmed. This is why, like, an alcohol tax or like a cigarette tax doesn't hurt individuals so much as it creates like collective effects. So, like, if enough people decide, no, maybe I can only afford 3 beers instead of 4 beers, right? But like the collective effect of that on millions of people is like a huge decrease in the consumption of alcohol, which leads to decreased violence, decrease in like car accidents, all of these different things.
Yeah, obviously, I'm just saying that like the most likely demographic of people who would like the difference between that like having 3 beers wouldn't be university students.
What are when?
I heavily disagree with
It
that.
wouldn't be.
Not
I don't.
the studies find that the effect is most pronounced on university students.
So
like I think they have quite a lot of disposable income as like just an average.
I'm pretty sure like I have a graph of like average incomes or something, or like average
I'm
net
talking
worths.
about disposable income.
Yes.
Studies specifically find that
average net
university
worth.
students are the most susceptible to the effect. They're the most likely to cut drinking in response to an alcohol
because they don't have as much money.
So to you, my friend Joe, who's already trying to run away. I'm getting out of here. She's had enough. But Joe, no, seriously, thank you for your input here. I thought that was really useful. And you and I have engaged on this topic multiple times in the past. And your thoughts about like using consent as like the single axis to this topic. I've heard them multiple times, and I like the way you put it this time in terms of like we should be teaching more on mutual pleasure, right? Mutual enjoyment. That's like an area that we don't actually cover, that most people don't seem to understand, and that we could make a lot of progress there. And that consent is just is one tiny piece to a much larger puzzle dealing with this. I thought this was really, really good. It's something that we never discuss on this channel. So I just want to thank for that. And I mean, you've said this before, but I think I get it more now when you put it that way. So
yay. No, you know, the other thing is that, just quickly, the way that consent is written into university sexual assault policy is as if it is something that is given, when in reality consent is something that is negotiated, especially at a period where people are experimenting a lot and like learning a lot of things. There are certain things that you might be okay with and certain things that you will not be okay with within a singular interaction. So it makes it really tricky if, say, someone is having consensual sex with someone and then at one stage that person gets choked, they're not okay with it, they say they're not okay with it, that behavior stops, and you go back to having consensual sex. The way that the consent framework is pushed in sexual assault policy, it's really difficult to understand how you should categorize that interaction, because there was technically a period where you were having non-consensual sex, and this also makes it very difficult for broadly men, who are most likely to be charged under Title IX. Oh, I don't know if you would even say charged, to have a Title IX case brought against them, to talk about that, because if someone said no and you stopped and everything else was good the whole time, like, it makes for a really tricky understanding of sexual interactions. And one other thing that you said in terms of teaching people about enjoyment is that the other thing that is ripe on campuses is that women overwhelmingly report during their university years that they do not have good sex. Ever. But that is not the case for men, who report having very pleasant sexual experiences throughout university. So
men are trash. Than y'all.
But no.
Two birds with one stone here.
I 100%.
Is it? Is it different?
I 100% agree with you.
Have you ever
on
heard
the
a man
second
talk
part?
about
Is it?
bad sex?
So,
Look,
so
guys,
I,
look,
I,
look,
I,
look, man.
Men can be satisfied by a
complain about
grapefruit.
sex?
It's different.
Ever.
Look,
Okay,
man, it's
It's
been over
different?
it's
Why
been
is
over
it
a
different?
1,000 years and you guys still can't find the clip. Like,
okay,
come on.
we're working on it. We're working
hold
on
It's
it.
different if you don't give a
Patty,
shit.
we didn't have
It's
to
different
go
if you
there.
don't
That
give a
was
shit.
pretty
That's the only time it's
This
different.
whole
Actually.
conversation.
Scientists are just about to crack the code. We're going to find the clip any minute now, any day. we're sure we're going to find that. But so I wanted to because I think that was like the heart of our disagreement before on what you just said. So the second part, I agree with you 100% in terms of women not having pleasurable experiences. Yeah, like we need to teach people in general. Like the part of sex ed is not just like knowing the body parts, right? But how to have good sex, how to have enjoyable sex, and I think that's something that's worthwhile, right? To all of humanity.
I don't want to learn that from my fucking
okay. But on the
But this is the problem, right, Universe? Because you actually don't want to learn that at all. Because if you did, then you wouldn't have said what you just said.
I learned through experience.
Oh, boy.
I don't want some 70-year-old man to be like, and this is where the clitoris is. You go ahead and rub it like this and make it at the same time.
Yeah, I don't want Bill Cosby to be talking about
That's not
clitoris.
that's an
That
extreme example. You're just using like an anecdote.
I'm making a joke. Yes, I'm making a joke. But yes, I think you can learn
You
through
know these already
experience. You
exist.
can, but like you don't learn through like one night stands. I think that's why a lot of the times when you're saying like women in college have horrible sex, it's not really like lasting relationships. I think you learn through having a consistent partner where you get to test new things on. You know, that's how I learned.
But it doesn't
I didn't
matter
learn
because
from-
weirdly, in these one night stands, every single time a dude is enjoying himself. 9 times
Well,
out of
that's
10.
why I think it's different because it's easier for guys to get off than it is for women. That's a fact. Okay.
Because
it's
no,
not.
I'm
It's,
sorry, no.
we don't need
That
to
is
try as
fucked.
hard.
Okay, but how does
You
that?
don't try at all. That's why women don't get off because you don't. And it comes back to the reciprocity.
Shut up. Just Joe, go.
This comes back to the reciprocity thing. If instead of focusing on consent, you are focused on your partner having a pleasurable experience, you're respecting them enough to check that they are enjoying their time, then maybe we would have more women fucking coming in college instead of every dude just spreading his seed wherever the fuck he wants without giving a shit about who he's banging. That's the fact of the matter.
Make
this
women come
conversation,
again.
it just gets to it just comes to the enlightened position, right? Don't you guys know that all
Well, it
sex is
could
rape,
be-
guys?
So-
Informed consent is impossible.
So okay, I wanted to engage with, and now don't worry, I'll let everyone else back in soon. But Joe always gets me with this topic. I think you're hitting on a lot of great things, and so that relates back to that first point you had made before, in terms of that scenario you painted, with the choking, right? Wouldn't the optimal way, and we've disagreed on this before, the optimal way for that scenario to have gone is that you checked in with a person before you choke them? It's like, hey, is this something you might be into? Right? Like,
should always
yeah,
ask
but this
your
is what I said
partner.
before about like about the fact that research shows we're actually very good at picking up non-verbal refusal. I mean, if it's the first time you're ever having sex with someone, sure, but I don't think that women need to or men need to be in managerial positions whenever they're having sex. I think if you are in tune with your partner, you should. And to me, that's not a case of sexual assault. If something happens, this is what I'm talking about when I say consent is negotiated. Like there are times when things are going good, then you don't, because you can check in, but people also make mistakes. Like you can get hurt doing something with someone else and not realize that that person didn't do it intentionally. Like but you can still say no.
I agree with you, Joe. I completely agree with you that you can. Well, what you're stating is that yes, sex is or negotiation. Consent is more dynamic, and it fluctuates in an encounter, and you got to be aware of these things, right? My only point of contention is that, like, in that situation, especially with a new partner that you don't know will enjoy that. Like, not everyone likes.
Okay, I know what our disagreement is. I
Okay,
agree,
please.
but it's not necessary.
Okay.
It's not a necessary condition in that, like when I'm with a partner of 6 years, I don't need them asking every time they do anything to me if it's okay. And it's not going to cover every single instance of non-consensual activity because sometimes things aren't done intentionally with foresight. Sometimes things just happen in the moment. And I still need to be able to say, no, that's not working for me, without it turning into a I was just assaulted.
No,
Like
So the
there
thing
is
is,
I
safety
agree
net
with
there.
you.
the consent has
So
already
hold
been
on,
given
one
in a
second, hold on.
long-term relationship.
One second. Yeah, yes, exactly that. It's been already. Well,
Like the consent can be revoked, but the thing is, like, when you're in a
Yeah.
long-term relationship, you know what they want, right? You know the things that they like. So like once it's already been like delegated, like previous, like on hand, like previously, right? It doesn't have to be during the encounter, but if they do say no during the encounter, the consent can be revoked, but the consent can be given for long periods of time. Like,
no.
But also, university doesn't educate like this. If you do, so at the university I work at, when you do the sex consent matters module, it says that every single time you engage in a sex act, no matter how long you've been with the person, you need to ask for consent.
So I agree with what you're saying there, Joe. Like everything you've said, agree.
Okay.
But I guess mostly I'm talking about with new partners, right? With brand new partners where you don't have that understanding, right? You don't have that comfortability, and it might be harder to read them because not everyone shows their displeasure. Like displeasure isn't immediate, right? We've seen this, right? That some women, right, will actively say, "Oh, this doesn't feel comfortable." They'll vocalize this, or they'll give some clue that's very distinguishable. Other people, they may think they're being clear and that they don't like what's happening, but it's not clear. Some people can make mistakes, right? So in that case, right, with a new person, then would the best way for that scenario that you painted to happen is to ask beforehand, like, I don't know this person, but I want to try something new. It might be pleasurable, but hey, can I check in with you, right? Like you're saying, check in with their pleasure, but I mean, if you're not consenting to it, then you're probably not going to enjoy it, right? So when again, be able to check in.
If you're talking about one night
yeah,
stands,
for anything
you probably
new,
don't want to be
like
going
this is just
way
like
too out of the
basic
box with
communication
it.
skills with your. This is just basic communication skills with a partner. Like, even if it's a short-term partner, if you've never done something with someone before, you should just, like, people are like embarrassed to do this. Just like stop being a bitch. Like, just
Yeah.
ask them, "Oh, is it okay? Are you into choking?
Yeah.
Or do you like this thing?"
That's
Because
not what it is. It
the
drives out
worst,
behavior. It just doesn't.
the
It
best
just
case
a lot of
scenario
people it
is
doesn't work for them.
just the best case scenario. Well, stop being a bitch and learn how to communicate
I
like
can
a human
communicate
being.
without
So
having
like,
to talk. Is the
yeah.
thing.
Well,
So the thing is,
if
like,
I could just
you don't want to end up in a situation
And
with
yet,
the worst case,
you say
I'm gonna continue. The best case scenario is it becomes super awkward and it's just over, right? Like the mood is killed, right? Because like they really didn't like it, and it's over. Worst case scenario is like you end up doing something someone really doesn't like, right? And they end up getting hurt, right? And you end up getting in trouble, or they are really like hurt emotionally, or and like are just put off by you. Like
So
there are problems that come with lack of verbal communication, explicit communication.
Big deal. I'll let you in. Joe, I want an answer to my question later on. So, but go ahead, Big Deal.
Yeah,
I might go in a second.
Well, then tell me. Then before you go, tell me.
No, you can go to other people first. Go
Okay.
to other people. I'll stick around until I respond to you. I'm just letting you. I'm giving you a warning.
Okay.
So I don't see any issue with like people like giving or like providing what they're into before they like have a sexual experience, even before like a one night stand. Even like if you just discuss these types of things beforehand, all right. Even for like, even though most people will be able to understand, like say a non-verbal cues or these types of things, it doesn't like really tell you enough about whether or not the person actually wants to do it. If like you have like somebody expressively and verbally telling you that like, hey, they're into this idea, all right, that, and you go on and proceed to the even if they end up say getting hurt in it, at least you had that. Versus like just in the heat of the moment, you're just like, hey, you want to do this thing that I saw in a porn video? Okay.
That's really
It's like
weird.
weird
And
and
then like
awkward, yeah.
proceed to go on afterwards with that.
Is it okay if I is it okay if I choke you? Like just like in the middle of sex? Like no.
Yeah, I don't
You just-
know.
As long
I've
as you
never
discuss
heard of this
everything
happening
beforehand,
before.
Yeah,
things
just
are less
discuss it
awkward.
beforehand.
They're like more fun, and you don't run into any of the problems that you would potentially, right? It might not be probable that these problems could happen, but the fact that there is a likelihood that is probable enough, right, means that you should probably just communicate. It's super easy. Like it's
So-
really easy to just talk to your partner if you're comfortable with them.
So Joe, I
Go ahead.
think I just want to get some clarification for my own personal understanding here. So I think the argument that you and Patty hear is that the consent model isn't developed enough and it's often more superficial in its current extent. Like basically, consent while on a verbal level is some level of good. It doesn't necessarily encompass the full range of interactions on a sex basis right now. Is that what you're saying?
I don't know. I can't speak for what Patty is saying.
Yeah.
What I'm saying is that consent has become so since geez, how do I consent is like a really bloated term that is used to cover literally everything now. It's used to cover pleasure, it's used to cover respect, it's used to cover reciprocity. Apparently, consent is now a stand-in word for everything. And as Red Charlotte is saying, right, something that's really important when we're talking about sex is communication. And now suddenly you have this single word that's trying to represent 1,000 different equally important ideas. There is importance to having a conversation about respect. There is importance to having a conversation about pleasure. And we can't have any of those conversations to a meaningful extent because the only word we have that is accepted within the discourse to talk about sex is consent. And consent has a very specific meaning. And it is really only, I mean, obviously it's important to an extent within social interaction, but for me, consent is a legal term. And it's something that I understand legally. To me, it is one of the least important ideas when talking about sexual interactions because it should be subsumed into the other terms instead. If I am having a reciprocal interaction with someone where I am invested in their pleasure, then it is assumed that they are consenting because that is one of the base foundational things for me to be able to get them to a place where they're having a pleasurable experience. So the fact that consent is the benchmark is such a shitty low benchmark. And I just think enthusiastic consent and all of this stuff to me is just nonsense. And I wasn't prepared to come on and be hyperbolic. And obviously I spend a lot of time talking about this exact issue. But yeah, to me, the issue with consent is it's a bloated term that has become almost meaningless in a really complex field where we need much more language to have meaningful communication.
So I think I would.
You can
I think okay. So I think I get the perspective, and I think to some extent the issue that also comes with like the legal model of consent right now is it often puts like the onus on the victim instead as opposed to like the victimizer. And I think I get it where you're coming from, is that because what happens is like it's basically like schools just trying to adopt a model in order to like meet the baseline needs or like the baseline lack of like suing and such.
Yeah, and I'm not saying we should get rid of consent. I think it's important to keep it. I'm just saying it shouldn't be the cornerstone of our discussion of sex policy.
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think we need like a greater development of models in order to like have a more like effective means outside of just like legal standards, but also like within social and like psychological standards as well.
I kind of disagree with that to an extent. I do believe actually, like, even though like the at the very least in the United States, the sex education system is garbage and awful, and I agree needs to be expanded a lot more. I think at the very least, the bottom line should be this is the bare minimum to not get into a situation where you have sexually assaulted or raped somebody. Like that should be obviously like the bare minimum.
But that's the
that we ought to
problem.
teach
We
people.
shouldn't be teaching people to the bare minimum.
I know we
should
shouldn't be.
teaching
Wait,
people.
I agree. Which is why I said this is. This is why I said that there should be other things along with, and we should expand it. But you said you disagree that this should be the cornerstone or something like that. I do believe it should, in fact, be like the cornerstone, the foundation. This is number one. Don't do these things, and then we can expand it to other things. I also kind of take issue. Yes, I think that consent to an extent is a bloated term, but I also believe multiple different things within the context of sexual interactions with each other.
Sorry, get away from that jet engine. That'd be great.
I'm so sorry about that.
No problem. But and so you can respond to that, Joe, if you like, and then maybe PB Success. You had your hand up previously, and okay, and Nacho.
To be honest, I didn't fully hear it because of the jet engine, but my argument is always going to be that
my bad.
I think It's all right. It's all right. I'm into a more democratically hedonic style of sexual education. I think part of the reason we focus on consent still is the refusal of desire to women.
Bless
Women
you.
aren't allowed to desire things. They are only allowed to be desired. And I think that's why we focus so much on consent and this idea that a woman is allowed to say what is done to her instead of viewing sex as something which is engaged in by two people. I think moving away from that would create a better sex culture generally. And I think, as I've said before, I think bad sex is just as important to learn about as sexual assault, because I think it's a continuum that comes from a lack of respect and care for your sexual partner. But yeah, I just think there are conversations and questions we can't ask when the conversation is reduced to one around consent. And I'm not saying we don't have consent in sexual education, but if that is your marker, if that is what you center things around, you are centering around saying, just make sure you don't physically fucking assault someone instead of like, oh, this is sex, this is what we want, like this is a pleasurable thing that comes from respecting someone. And this is why I got into sex politics in the first place, because I think one of the in the heterosexual world, one of the most core interactions that the genders have is sex. And if you don't have respect in that space, you don't have respect anywhere. And consent does not constitute respect. Just not raping someone is not consent, is not respect.
Oh,
So,
amazing, Joe. That was a great.
Prime,
Really good.
I'm going to be hopping off here. Joe, thank you very much. That honestly is like added a new dynamic to the thought process. So I really appreciate that. So like that's not something I had considered before, and honestly, like like that's like the second time I've heard you talk, and I think like really good points. So overall, I'll be heading out. Thanks, Prime, for having me on. Check out Wordy Talks on Twitch. I'll see you guys later.
Okay, so thank you. And Joe, that was incredible. As usual, very much impressed. Let's go to PBS and then Nacho.
Real quick, sorry. I too am gonna head out. It was really nice talking to you guys. See you next time.
Have a good one.
Goodbye, Patty.
All right. So next, PB success.
PB success, by the way.
Yeah.
And yeah, I totally agree with Joe on this and expanding the conversation and not framing sex to go into sexual encounters, not just thinking about what could go wrong, but like, why are you there in the first place, and so I wanted to connect this to something, an exchange from earlier in the conversation, and whether like socialization and culture was a factor here. And I think that culture is always a factor. It's always in the background. And I think a lot of these issues I view through the lens of culture. So even this, like going back to what, sorry, who's the last person that just left right now?
Wordy, maybe?
Patty.
Or Patty?
Oh, Patty. Yeah. So Patty was concerned earlier that, like, if people say that they're going to implement new educational measures, that not to get your hopes up, right? And I think one thing there is like a concern for the quality of the education. Like, it's not enough just to deliver information, because then we could just put billboards everywhere that say, that teach people about about how to have sex. And it's about acculturating someone. It's about developing a sensibility. Red Charlotte mentioned something earlier of giving people the tools to think with, and giving people the tools to read their social encounters. And part of that, is knowledge in terms of like, what are the concepts and the things that you have to like pay attention to. But ultimately, like, it's bringing people into like a cultural, like a mode of being. And unfortunately, the education culture, like the culture of schools and universities, aren't so concerned with that. They're bureaucratic institutions, and they're ultimately concerned with, the accountability and legal matters. Like, I'm reminded, I was I am a graduate student union member, and I'm not sure what the state of this thing was, but the Title IX was mandating us to be mandatory reporters, and it was in like the sexual assault training that we had, and this is really problematic our union.
Sorry, hold on. Before you do, no, fuck, god damn it, Joe, Joe, god damn it, shit. All right, she left. All right, fuck me. Get back
like
here.
the basic thing about communication, though, is like, so yes, there are nonverbal cues you can give your partner to imply, or not even just imply, you're just using your body to say yes or no, like very explicitly, right? But the thing is, there are lots of people in society, particularly people who are neurodivergent, who literally don't understand those things, right? Or have a harder time understanding it. People who don't even have to be neurodivergent. Just not everyone has, there's no such thing as universal, like, unspoken language. It's all like dependent on where you're
Sign
from, your
language.
culture, and like a bunch of other things imply different things, right? So like, I don't think anyone here would think it would be appropriate for me to, on a one night stand, first night, to, without asking, pull out a knife and like cut someone's thigh, right?
Oh my
No,
This is the
god.
second weapon you
it's
brought.
That's
not.
hot.
This is not a weapon. This is a pocket knife. Shut the fuck up. This would be
Those are
totally
illegal in some
inappropriate,
states.
right?
That's a
One, it
weapon.
would be assault, right? I would be like physically assaulting them, right?
Well,
It'd be
tying someone
super
up could be
inappropriate,
assault.
right? Well, yeah,
I
that's
mean,
but the point is
technically,
it's a sex
spanking
act
someone
when
in
it's
sex
consensual, right?
is
But
illegal
but
too.
At you
just
guys.
for something like this, and the more extreme you go, like, verbal communication before the act is super important. You shouldn't be doing like extreme things, and like people in chat were being like, "Oh, choking's like normal," blah blah. I understand that everyone in this like audience is like sex desensitized. The vast majority of the world and the vast majority of people, choking is not vanilla. And if you do
That
choking
is true.
wrong, you can get hurt.
You can kill someone so easy. It's not. I did jujitsu for basically my whole life. You
Like,
have
you can't,
no idea
if you've
how
just met
easy
a
it is to
girl
kill
and she
someone by
hasn't told
choking
you,
them.
or you don't know
Alright,
that she's into choking
relax.
or not, you shouldn't just start choking her.
It
No,
is.
no.
Because
What
what they do
definitely
is they
shouldn't
end
be
up
doing that.
crushing their fucking throat, and they don't do a blood
Well,
choke.
that's what
They
I
do
was
an
trying
air
to say. I was
choke.
trying to.
So
Damn, son.
you're
Wait, real
absolutely
quick.
hold on a second. Hold on. You're absolutely correct, Paul. What you said is something that has to be repeated. Like, in terms of choking, it's a bit of a side note here, but in terms of choking, hey, be extremely careful, because you can easily seriously hurt someone, if not kill someone, when doing
Someone
that.
who's weaker than you could kill you by choking you very easily.
Very easily.
Play
Like,
safe
it's
and
We
no
get
joke.
that you know
It's
a lot
no
about
joke.
choking, a weird amount about choking.
I'm
You've
just
had
No,
jujitsu
but like
for 9
moving it
years.
back to the
What?
conversation
Pretty
again,
simple
like
shit.
Red Charles
I'm
is
just
entirely
joking.
correct that
I know.
there is no universal unspoken language. There are clear like body cues and stuff like that
It's sign
could tell you
language.
sign language isn't universal, dummy. There are like multiple versions of sign language. There's ASL. There's even Black ASL, which is a subset of ASL. So like there are different forms of sign language. You're just completely ignorant on what sign language is if you think it's universal. Furthermore, like again, this has nothing to do with the overall conversation. So I don't know why you're bringing that up.
Okay. So PB success. Finish your point.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I just want to bring up the idea that there are different levels of trust for different acts. Like, for like example, like I wouldn't go up to someone at a bus stop that I don't know and give them a hug, but a hug is a relatively benign, safe act. And so I think that with different levels of intimacy, there's different levels of trust. And verbal communication is a very easy way to get a predictably get and reliably get a response for whether someone would enjoy something that you are interested in doing. I agree with that completely, but I just wanted to bring the idea of like thinking about it in terms of like not just transactional, but it's like dancing with someone, like reading people's. I know that I'm kind of opening that door up again to saying like, read people's intentions, and yes, communication verbally is a great way of doing that, but it's not, I guess, the only way.
No one's claiming it's the only way. They're claiming that it's probably the best way and the safest way to go about it. Because while
Like,
pleasure and like happiness
so I guess,
and a healthy
yeah.
sexual relationship are very, very, very important, the most important thing is you are not harming somebody. That is like the most important thing.
Yeah,
But if
this,
your
this,
partner
this,
is all those
this-
things,
the,
you're
the
fine.
thing is that this changes the longer the relationship goes on, generally, right? Generally. The longer you know someone, you know their cues. You know how they communicate physically. You know when they mean no and when they mean yes and what they're into because you've been with them long enough that you've had these conversations and you've, you know, engaged, you know, with them, right? Like, but when you're with a one night stand or like a short term relationship, things are completely different, and communication should be completely different. And again, like just because you have long term consent, that consent even mid act can be revoked, just like instantly, right? They say no, you're over, it's done.
Yeah, I agree with what Red Charlotte said though about discussing it all beforehand. I think that's a much wiser thing to do than actually in the
Didn't you
mid
say
of
that like not
accepting.
harming somebody?
part of the issue.
But wait, didn't Paul just say that like earlier that not harming someone is not as important or is less important than like the pleasure and all that other stuff? Because he
No.
disagreed with my statement on that.
Isn't it,
No, I
that
didn't,
it's as
but
important?
okay.
It's that, it's if you're focusing on their pleasure, like you are necessarily focusing on them not getting hurt. Like at that point, like them not getting hurt is redundant. You're already doing that by necessity.
That's not necessarily true.
How do you focus on someone's pleasure? Like all
pain, like pain
some
and pleasure
people
are like
can enjoy being hurt, but I don't think
if you're
that's
focusing
what
on,
I don't think
everybody.
those people are
somebody
very right in the mind though.
if you're engaging in a sexual activity, something.
What the
so
fuck? You just
and
got brought
you're
up
focused
choking.
and you're focusing
I didn't
on
bring it up. Someone else did.
making them comfortable. No, I said choking's not vanilla. It's definitely not something you should do
It's
on the
not.
first time you're doing something. But you know, it's as long as you're focused on making the other person comfortable, which that should just involve everything that comes with that. So if it involves talking about something, if that's what you think will make them feel more comfortable. In my case, there's been a mixture of both nonverbal and verbal, communication. It doesn't have to be one or the other. I don't think I had to sit down and write down all the things that they wanted to do and everything. But then at the same time, if something was going on or I wanted to try something, you communicate it. But not everything needs to be, can I do this? Is this okay? It makes for it can make for a really awkward time, or it could just be, but so can doing something without asking. So there's no like
Yep.
specific way to get this done, like with 100% accuracy. There's theoretical, but it's just not the case.
Hey,
People
but you
are
can get as close as possible.
Yeah, but
Ought we not do the safest way though?
the thing is that I
but
don't
you
see
could do
any
it. But you can,
individual, all right, like losing the opportunity to bang somebody because they were like, hey, this is what I'm into, all
well,
right,
you
and it
need to
doesn't need
go
to be
out
like
more than.
it doesn't need to be like a script. It doesn't need to be like literally just listing every single porn category that you watch the most.
Oh god.
Okay, it just
I would never
needs
do
to
that.
I don't even watch
literally
porn, and that sounds
it
weird.
literally just needs to be like, yo, like I think this is kind of cool, dog. Like trying to try this or whatever.
This
Like
shit's like a
anything,
CVS receipt.
anything like this,
Ugh.
all right, I think is way more useful than like all of the things that can go wrong in like the heat of the moment option. So like I always just say, even though like sure, I'm sure somebody has like had an awkward conversation like spur out because of this, like the risk of that occurring, I think is like a hell of a lot less than like anything or like say something worse occurring and like doing the vice versa. Like where you just do it without asking them, or like in the
Yeah,
heat of the
that's
moment after a
bad.
deal.
So it seems
Like really bad.
sorry.
So let's go. Yeah, Nacho, it's your turn. Yeah.
I was just gonna add, like, it seems like a lot of these issues could sort of be resolved by making sure everyone has like a core set of morals. Now, like I'm a Christian, I'm not gonna push that on everybody, but I mean you can still have a logical basis, like a base set of morals. Like I've heard Destiny give his little 2 bits, and I actually heard this the other day, and I thought it was really based. So I'm gonna read it out because it's really short, but it's like, I exist, I have an experience, I want to maximize my experience. Other people exist, other people have experience, other people want to maximize their experience. Humans want to synergize. If I help them maximize their experience, they'll probably, help me maximize my experience as well. So it's like just having some core like morals, I think could solve a lot of these issues as well. Because I mean, it could definitely help with solving issues like that. And then it could help with, you want to be forming. I mean, by default, you would be forming longer term relationships. I think in general, because you know, you want to care about somebody, you want to, so, and then that would also solve the problem of like, you're not going to not know what this person is into or is not into if you like been dating them for a long time, you've been talking, you've been probably sexting or whatever, you're like talking about what you're into before, you know, you build up to that place. And so you kind of, without having to literally go through like the script of like, what are you into? I'm into this. Are you into this? Are you into this? Like really like you're at a, you know, corporate meeting or something and you're like showing them a PowerPoint, like, you know, and then signing a consent form, like, you know, you build a longer term relationship. That's my, you know, kind of more conservative take, I guess. But I don't know.
I
What,
think
what
if
do you think
people
about that?
respected them, if they're in the sound mind, right? If you respect other people the way you respect yourself, which is in hopefully a good manner, I think this wouldn't be that much of an issue.
In
So
my
yeah,
opinion,
morals would help.
I think the most valuable part of this conversation really was I don't remember her name, but like it was the girl's like seems that she was rather passionate about like sex politics.
Joe, the silly
I
serious.
think
Yes, that's her.
yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty basic.
I think that the focus being on like just raw consent isn't productive at all. Like it leads to like a whole lot of weird legalese questions. Like I can say in personal experience, like I've had situations where like, hey, I didn't necessarily feel comfortable like having sexual intercourse with somebody just because of the fact that I was unsure about the consent situation. Okay. And all of this I feel as if is really it's not useful, even though I've gone through an entire like essentially like a module pertaining to that, and I didn't gain anything of value from that. But I think is way more important is just generally speaking, respecting other human beings, plus also like caring about their pleasure. All right. If like you just understand the cues of like what somebody's into, okay, or like whether or not they're into this, but even if you don't necessarily have that conversation beforehand, at least it's better than like say somebody who doesn't understand that or like or isn't focused on that and just does it irrespective of that. Like I feel as if that is far more of an important of a part of the conversation than like the consent part. I think the consent part, I think like everybody kind of understands like, yeah, like if this person says no, I shouldn't do it. The only
You would
people who
be
do it irrespective of
surprised.
that are the worst people in society.
Right.
You'd be surprised.
There are sexy ways of talking about what you're into, though. Like I'm like really into the BDSM community. Like, I have my kinks, and a big part of that community, it's not just like debauchery and sex all the time. I mean, it's a lot of sex, but it's like it's a lot of respect and communication. So you're kind of hitting the nail on the head, but there is a lot of verbal communication that goes into that. You know, before you tie somebody up in a bunch of ropes, you really need to communicate what you're doing. You know, you need to have all these. So there's different like encounters too, though. Like if you're meeting, God damn it, I'm gonna get right into this again. Like if you're meeting somebody just out like as a one night stand kind of thing, like at a bar, I'll use the bar as an example. You don't typically want to walk up and ask if things are okay. You should know because you have to meet this person out of nowhere and like I mean I don't know how y'all flirt and how y'all do things, but it's supposed to be really natural. Like it's supposed to be a flow. Like you might not hook up with them that night, but you might meet someone really cool, get their number, maybe go out later on in the week, and then maybe that leads to something. But there's still a lot of communication. I just think there's different forms of communication rather than talking. But certain scenarios need clear and defined verbal communication because you're getting into things that could potentially be really dangerous or hurtful. So, I mean,
I agree with that, but like just to touch on like an example, like as somebody who spends a lot of time, all right, pubbing as a university student, I mean like there's a whole lot of downtime, all right, where it's like either you just silence or like you don't know what to talk about because you don't may not necessarily have like same classes, same things going on in your life that you're into. All right. So these like say you're on the metro, say you're on the streetcar, say you're on the Uber, like these are all moments that are opportunities to like just ask okay questions about that person, and it doesn't need to like again be like, hey, do you want to sign this like contract to do anal at these this exact time for this amount of time? Like no, it can just be like, hey, like I'm into this. And like generally there are like I know guys who've gotten girls who are into that type of thing because they just asked beforehand.
Okay, all right, let's get back at it. Oh, and Red Shred had to leave. That's unfortunate. And Savitar, you're here. Maybe you'll be good for this conversation as well. I wanted to talk about states' rights and whether they're important or not. So I'm curious what you all have to say about this. But Red Charlotte had mentioned that she doesn't care about states' rights at all. And is that a common feeling here? Do you...
I mean, I really.
In what aspect?
Well, if you want to ask Avatar first, but I see a lot of value in states' rights. But not from like the weird I'm only going to apply states' rights arbitrarily as an argument for as to when it benefits my side politically, but more so in the fact that like I think it holds the fabric of the country together in a way.
Okay.
States as in the United States, or like states as like
the United
international
States.
relations?
United States, yes.
United States.
To an extent, I believe states' rights should be limited to just general governance infrastructurally within the state itself. So just very vague general stuff to apply to maybe the unique geography of the area, so on and so forth. But when it comes to important things that, again, it's all about utility. When it comes to human rights, when it comes to education, military, so on and so forth, national security, I would just say, nah, fuck your states' rights. You gotta do what we say.
I would agree with that.
For
I
the
really
most part, I
think
think we already do that.
No, we don't actually. To an extent,
Excluding education, obviously, where states have like by far the most
healthcare, electricity, because that's decentralized in a lot of states like Texas.
What do you mean
as
healthcare?
we've clearly seen.
Tax now, right?
Taxes to an extent as
Except for
well.
federal.
Most tax collection is done by the IRS, but yeah, obviously you could for in Canada,
The
for
IRS
example,
is poorly funded.
Yeah, I agree, but like Canada, for example, which is where I live, all right, and it serves as a parallel in a lot of situations. At least the CRA here, they handle basically all the taxes, excluding like in Quebec. So I see utility and value in like say having the IRS just handle it because it's way more simple. Okay, like having a state.
Well, what do we mean by states' rights? Like, what do we
states' rights?
to do what?
I mean that like the states has the right to have jurisdiction, okay, or like power over a specific area, and sometimes, like, at least in the case of the United States, oftentimes it's a blend of the two. Whereas,
to what
like,
extent do they have power over like this area? So, like, I agree to a certain extent. Like the
certain
concept of
aspects, I think they should have full
municipalities and provinces
jurisdiction
are
over.
cool. In what ways though? So like when you mean jurisdiction, I mean government's
Or when I say
jurisdiction?
sole
Sure.
jurisdiction, I mean like more so like say how we handle municipal governments or like the structure that they exist in. I think that because they're like creations or like creatures of the state that are created by them, I feel as if like that should be handled by them. Obviously, like the creation of municipal governments, like the creation of these types of things, or like
Yeah, counties and stuff like that. Sure, that should be 100%
so like
handled by the
obvious things like
states.
that, I think we can agree upon. But like I think more so there's obviously nuance in healthcare. Like in healthcare, for example, like the Canadian healthcare system is comparably, at least to the United States, rather decentralized. Medicare is like this big overarching federal agency that essentially handles a whole lot of things. And it seems as if that's the way that like healthcare is most efficiently done in America. Thus, all right, great. I see a lot of utility in like giving the federal government more power over that. But things like, I don't know, maybe public transport. I don't necessarily know, all right, if the federal government would be the best agency to handle that.
Why would transport be good for the states if transport goes across states?
Yeah.
Like how would you handle like interstate like railways
that go across the country?
So transport goes across states, but oftentimes most commutes are in between states. Or I mean, within like either near
Interstate.
local states or like within the state itself.
Yeah.
The supermajority, I'm sure, of transit is within the state itself.
What about
So I mean, like
airspace?
obviously, it's just where we draw the borders. Like Amtrak can exist because the federal government can own railways. All right, but like, would I want Amtrak to suddenly like I don't know own the MBTA? No.
I think federally owned railways is a good idea, though, to a great extent. I
don't disagree with that. What I'm saying is that, like, I wouldn't want the federal government to control the MBTA, which for just like Massachusetts is like transit system essentially, like for the
yeah. I mean, but
major
you're just agreeing with me though that like when it comes to general governance, municipal government, infrastructure of the state itself to an extent, that's okay. Then we get into like overall utility when it comes to things like energy or things that we believe ought to be human rights. That's when we say, no, fuck your state's rights. The federal government's going to step in, and if you go against us, we will put our boot right on your fucking throat.
I mean,
there's the difference between
I
like
think that. Oh, sure. Go ahead.
There's a difference between like delegating like different tasks to different states, or saying like, okay, like to say like some of these smaller things are better done by smaller like ordinances. But it still isn't a states' rights thing, because like the federal government can still conceivably come in and override that. Like why should the federal government not have the ability to override like the states' wills in those things if it's like deemed necessary to do so?
Well, because of the fact that like oftentimes I think that like the federal government, or at least maybe stereotypically, often has a more top-down viewpoint of things and loses quite a lot of the nuance, right, in communities. And as such, I think that like these types of places should be able to govern themselves, and we should empower them to the best that we can to like have jurisdiction over their own communities, wherever we possibly can. But where in situations where it's clearly just not working or it's less efficient, absolutely not. The federal government should step in.
So I think you said something, a few things that are really interesting. So I like when you started off saying that like you're for states' rights, but like, or at least whether you're for or against it, like we should be consistent with it and not just when it's like benefits our team. So fair enough.
Yeah.
Okay. But on the other side of that, states' rights actually meant something very particular within American politics, right? In terms of
course.
In terms of being able to impose racist laws upon the localities upon within southern states. Like, yes, we should have the right to decide our own affairs, right? So states' rights, but that, and then that kind of morphed into other things. But in the heart of it, it was about being able to discriminate, right? and keeping the federal government out of it. So
it was one of the first dog whistles, essentially, wasn't it? Like,
oh, I'm sure there are more before then, but it's a very prominent dog whistle.
Welfare
It was
states'
one of
rights
the
were like
really big first
some of the biggest dog whistles were the first ones to come up.
Definitely within a modern context, though, it's one of the original.
It's such a weird topic to tackle because there's so much implied already. When you're talking about states' rights in this regard, you're already assuming this entire federal structure for which there are subordinate structures.
Okay. Yeah. So what?
So
we're not getting into this anarchist meme, dude.
That's a whole bunch of assumption.
Don't be mean, no.
But
yes, I do in fact presume that the federal government exists, because I get a bill, and it's pretty big.
So okay, but
Prime, I gotta go.
Okay,
I gotta go to work. Thank you for having me.
We would love to have you again, Paul. You were a lot of fun.
Thank you.
Please come back. Yeah, we are definitely welcome here.
Yeah, thank you very much. I'll most.
Okay. So I think he was going to say something else, but Savitar, right? On that anarchist meme, on that particular anarchist meme. The point I was going to make is that we do. A common anarchist take is that it's best to have government that is closer to the people, right? The closer the government is to the people, the more like democratic it is, right? And so and that'd be having smaller and smaller governmental structures, right? Like regional governments. So if that being the municipal government, right? You have more democracy within that, and then blowing it up to the state government and then the federal government. But each step removed you are from the actual people, the farther you're away from these decisions and being able to affect these decisions. There's value in that, right? And that simply having a smaller unit to govern people. Do you think so, Savitar? And then everyone
to an
else.
extent, sure. Like it could be far more efficient to just have a smaller unit closer to the people. But again, that's generally speaking for average, ordinary things. But when it comes to, as you said, human rights or important issues to deal with wide sweeping problems within the society itself, such as police reform, race relations, religion relations with one another, fundamental moral differences in values, or fundamental differences in moral values, sorry. These things, I think, need to be handled by the federal government. And damn what the states say, you will do what the federal government says, because I don't care how many racists there are within your state. They don't get to oppress black people because they're racist.
You're painting a picture where everything that the states do is bad, and everything the federal government does is okay.
Right. I literally said it's okay for them to do like the general, normal, everyday act of governance. That's something they ought to be able to do because it's more efficient there. That's perfectly fine.
Okay, but so much of our federal policy,
federal government be able to do.
So the issue with what I see Savitar saying here is that, like, I think we all agree, generally speaking, obviously the federal government, where like somebody's rights are being violated, should step in. The issue is for us to when perhaps the federal government does the wrong thing. And oftentimes when they make these big overarching policies, it affects everybody. Everybody gets fucked. Okay, so versus like say if a state, all right, decides to do some sort of policy, not necessarily everybody gets fucked. So we can minimize the amount of fuckery that occurs in the country in certain ways. Sometimes we're not having like the federal government, and Republicans, keep in mind here, do exist at the federal level, in power there.
So
are you okay with the states just fucking themselves over? Like, can we just implement good policy at the federal level? Plus, the federal government is less likely to be wrong in the first place because by nature of
I don't know about that.
I don't know about that.
But by nature of encompassing a greater number of people, it's gonna be more likely to arrive at the majority opinion, which is more likely to be correct.
But maybe the majority opinion.
Wait, what? The majority opinion is most likely to be correct? I don't agree with that.
Mob
a whole lot of people.
Hold on, 1 second. Please let Rox finish the point. Then I want to go to Nacho, who's been waiting very patiently. Then Rage, then PB.
It's this concept of mob intelligence. Like on average, people are correct. Any individual person might not be, but the more people you add, the less likely you are for the collective group to be wrong. So the federal government is more likely to be correct by virtue of encompassing more people.
I just don't believe that morals have truth value, so that means like that's why I disagree entirely.
Okay, so we'll move on, but I just want to say this one thing because this is what I've been trying to get out for a while. In terms of no, fuck, don't tell me I just forgot it, because holy shit, I'm gonna be really frustrated with myself.
Did your brain not get primed for it?
Sorry, what?
You need to cease and desist.
Oh, fuck, it was shit. It was about god damn it, fuck. Something I've been trying to get out to Savitar for a while. What Big Dude brought up, right? Like in terms of being consistent with this, right? So you listed Savitar, you listed a whole bunch of things that I agree with, and you already know what I agree with. I'm like, when it comes to civil rights, maybe don't lead up to fucking states because they prove themselves to be really fucking untrustworthy, right? But can we come up with a consistent rule about that, right? Consistent rule as to when to do this. And on the other side of the ledger is that states are considered the laboratory of democracy, right? And which is a really kind of corny term, but it's actually proven useful, right? So we've seen, like, for instance, California lead the way in like environmental laws or something, right? When its regulation has been far ahead of everyone else. And in fact, it's affected the rest of the country because it happens to be such a big buyer of like cars and stuff. So since California makes that rule, then everyone gets that rule, right? So, like, isn't there also value in having states be able to on certain matters? And can yeah?
I've already said multiple times it's okay for states to like have precedent over certain matters within the like.
But how do we draw
system.
consistent
like,
rules? As I'm asking, like,
in a what?
A consistent like how do we know which things are okay to intercede in and which things are not? Be consistent. Is my question.
Just from like again, this would just go back to like the hedonic calculus and whether or not like certain issues would provide more utility in one case versus another. It would just be about what's your certain goal in a given context for like infrastructure, for example. What would be the most efficient way to, or a better example would be welfare, like welfare distribution within a given society. Generally speaking, the federal government is going to have a lot more of an efficient way of giving out welfare to people than just some state governments. The federal government is just more resources that can move more efficiently than any state government can possibly do, with maybe the exception of California. California is kind of a special case within the United States because of just how big and prosperous it is. But yeah.
Okay.
There's an economy of scale and diminishing returns calculus that falls into both of those.
Oh, well, thanks for being here. Go ahead.
Yeah, almost always having like an entire population, all right, focused on a particular task is almost always going to be like better than like or more efficient with regards to economies of scale when compared to that of like just an individual state. But like obviously there are diminishing returns. Like once you pass like perhaps like literal entire country of Canada level. Right, the like gain in efficiency might not be as much as like comparing Vermont to other places, but like I think the main point is that like The federal government can be wrong, and the states can be wrong too. But what solution can minimize harm? And I think if the federal government makes some sort of fucky policy, even though they oftentimes just refrain from making policy in the first place, all right, again, the point is that like it will affect almost everybody, almost definitely, because the federal government typically doesn't like say if they decide to set a minimum wage, it needs to be $15. It needs to be $15 everywhere. Or it needs to be $12 everywhere. What if instead, all right, and I understand the fact that like oftentimes states aren't in the correct form of government, but even considering the fact that they aren't in the correct form of government, or aren't doing this the correct thing, okay, at least it's only affecting that population.
Let's go to Nacho's been waiting, and then Nacho, Nacho Rage PB Ty Womt. Okay, let's go.
So I was just gonna make a lot of the same points that Prime was making. Like I feel like the states' rights are essential to like the development of our federal policies, because like they allow us to experiment with things like healthcare and UBI, which you've seen in like a lot of states doing. With like he was saying, environmental regulations, with making college education cheaper, college education, even like the small town where I'm at, they offer like if you graduate from the high school, you automatically get to go to the local community college for like 2 years, and I think a lot of places do that. Like on a local level, you get to experiment with a lot of things and provide, and kind of like those things tend to influence policy at a federal level, because then they can look to these states and they can look to these counties and say like, hey, look, well, this is what worked here and this is what worked there, so maybe we can find somewhere in the middle, and we can we can use these examples to adapt policies. And I mean, there's been a lot of benefit, I think, from allowing states to basically have free reign and do the things they did. I mean, yeah, so I think it covered like, yeah, UBI, healthcare, free college, environmental regulations, and I added free black citizens in there just for the memes. But I mean,
goddamn right,
it's a thing.
I mean, I think the issue is that like we're operating under the presumption that like the current U.S. federal government structure is like a necessity, when in reality, like a few minor changes, and we could absolutely implement some like reforms that we'd see as impossible today. Like simple things such as making Washington D.C. a state, okay, and restoring the Voting Rights Act would have like a massive effect on like what types of policy we'd be able to influence. And oftentimes I feel as if we just see the federal government as like this rock that's like immovable, when like it perfectly well is. These types of reforms, or big reforms that people like to talk about, are all things that could be achieved if we just made some other minor reforms, and we wouldn't need to have state governments be essentially constantly be like these weird little like test grounds for each and every single policy that we make, even though they are like a good means of or that would be a good means of testing out policy and seeing if it works.
And also just to tack on really quickly, I forgot to add in it helps kind of keep like the federal government in check as well, because
how
we have the option to secede, I guess.
do we have the option?
Okay,
No, we
we
don't.
can not do this. We have this debate like at least once a week on politics.
You have the option of a violent revolution, I suppose, and
You
the U.S.
have
Army
an
has
option to get violently put down.
Yeah, exactly. That's pretty much what that is.
Yeah, but that's the idea, right? As the states, you're supposed to be able to have some influence over the federal government and not allow them to get to.
Hey man, all I gotta say is away down south in the land of traitors.
Goddamn right.
Rattlesnakes and I don't know if I can sing that on Twitch actually.
Maybe not. Let's go to Rage.
Mute that.
No, it's fine. Rage, PB, Ty, Womps, and then Rocks. I see your hand up. Oh, and Wordy.
I would just echo the what was it? The experiments. You said the what was the term that you said, Prime? Because I've heard it before about the democracy.
Laboratory of democracy.
Laboratory of democracy. Yes. I do think there's utility in that. One of the things that comes to mind is like the federal policy on drugs, especially like marijuana, is not ideal. And then but individual states have been able to either decriminalize or legalize it, or some took the route of like the legalizing medicinal uses of marijuana. I think that there is utility to having the states being able to do things that the federal government isn't essentially ready to do. Another example, I don't know all the logistics of the term sanctuary cities, but like having the states being able to, I guess there's a conflict there between like certain states, like I guess California has sanctuary cities, and the federal government's policy on immigration. But I think there is utility in that because maybe the federal government's policy on immigration is just bad, and so you can have states who say, well, no, we're going to treat our immigrants differently than the federal government says. I not similarly, but in addition to that, I also think there's utility in having, as it was said before, your the rule like not the rulers, but like the people who govern more closely and locally related. Um, while I do understand that states are not always right, and so you can't say, oh, states' rights is always the best rights. I'm heavily in favor of people being able to control their local community. If they are violating other people's like liberties, like let's say like civil rights, and for instance, then I think we can appeal to the Constitution, and if the Constitution isn't right, then we should amend it to be right. But like when it comes to liberties of that order, then we can bring in the federal government. But for a lot of things, I think that we should let local communities, cities, states be able to control what goes on. Like um, another example before I give up the time.
Do you think states should
is-
have to deal with abortion? It should be up to states to decide whether or not like it's a woman's right to have an abortion or not.
I think we ended up deciding that on the federal level. We put it through the Supreme Court and went to the federal level. So I think there's what is it?
Yeah, but I'm asking
Precedent?
you. I'm
The
asking
Supreme
you.
Court doesn't legislate, by the way.
Yes, it does. Case law does
It
legislate.
does
You're
not.
wrong.
It does not.
Yes, it
That
does.
is
You're
wrong.
wrong.
Your opinion's
Semantics,
wrong
snooze
because
fest.
case law determines interpretation and application of law.
Prime,
So, like,
who's that one guy? Who's that one law student that comes on and like brings up case law all the time?
Pisco, he's in the chat.
Pisco.
Yeah, Pisco can come here and just like
Okay.
dunk on this
If
kid.
they wanted to
Whether or not it's
legislate bodies, they
legislation
would've
will
made it
change
written in
absolutely
like that.
nothing.
No,
you
literally,
realize that
they're-
legislation doesn't it just extend to creation of law? It also extends to the interpretation and application of law. So you're
Please get in
basically
here,
making
Pisco.
a reductionist argument here.
But technically, all the decisions only apply to the case at hand.
Okay.
Technically, but the problem
Did
is
you
case
know
law
that
sets a
abortion was
standard.
case law?
Standards
Did you
are
know
what
gay
Doug,
marriage
this
was
is
case
states'
law?
rights. Please.
Just
Come
mute
on,
him.
Doug,
I
doesn't need
take
to be
mock
on
Yeah,
trial.
let's
I
move back
have
to states' rights.
law
So, like,
school
well,
friends.
I think
study
but we
political
agree, generally
science to
speaking, on
minimize
states'
children.
rights that states should have general quote unquote soft sovereignty within their own borders to a certain extent, as long as they're not doing some really dumb shit.
There he is.
And if you, there we go. You say his name
Screw up
3
the bat
times, or you say
signal.
that states can't, or that the Supreme Court doesn't make law, and then he will appear, dude. Anyway,
I'm sick.
you wanna educate this young anarchist on what the Supreme Court actually has the power to do, just
Yeah,
like how.
I mean, I think you guys are having a bit of a inane argument here. Frankly, it's
Are
a
you
bit of a
plastered?
formalist argument about whether something is quote unquote law or not. I will say he did say something that was stupid, which was, whatever the decision is only affects the parties before them. There is this notion of like, certain holdings can only affect the litigants in certain cases, but there are exceptions to that rule. And of course, any precedent that you establish is, controlling, at least in the Supreme Court sense, to all lower courts on the specific issue. So I would say, if I'm being honest, the Supreme Court doesn't hand down legislation, but it certainly, what it says about the law is what the law is.
It
And
hands
so,
out policy, just not like necessarily legislation.
Yeah, so a great example of this actually ties it back to the original conversation. I think it's Johnson versus Michigan, which has to do, which is a precedent, I think, set by the Supreme Court and was upheld in a ruling in 2020, that states have the right to enforce vaccinations onto their population through various laws, of course. And I think that's a great thing that the federal government in general should probably do, especially in modern day United States. They should make legislation to enforce vaccination and or other sort of mandates to deal with this pandemic, because what other states such as Texas and Florida is doing is really fucking stupid, costing a lot of lives and money, and should probably be stopped.
So there's also been Supreme Court cases to the contrary where they upheld bodily autonomy and being forced to inject anything would be a violation of such.
Sorry, buddy, but like
Okay,
the Johnson versus
Oh
Michigan one
no,
that
Sevatar,
was
Sevatar.
great.
So there are some instances, for example, I believe like
Religious.
Jehovah, yeah, like religious exemptions based on like Jehovah's Witnesses.
Sure,
that,
and
like,
those
blood being,
eventually
like,
as well.
transfusions.
So I
Wait. To respond to that real quick, when it comes to blood transfusions, that was actually gotten rid of. That was primarily the Hasidic community or Semitic community. It's a Jewish community in New York. I'm pretty sure that started that, but it was all over the United States at one point. That blood transfusion exemption gotten out of, at least for children, because we eventually came to the conclusion that denying a blood transfusion to your dying child is child neglect, and if you do that, the CPS will be knocking down your door really fucking quickly. I think we should do the exact same thing with vaccines. If you don't vaccinate your child, you are neglecting your child, and CPS should come in.
So hold on, before we move too far with
I can bring it up to you.
Yeah, just DM me it.
So okay, that was Rage, then PB, Ty, Womt, Rox, Wordy. PB.
I think. Wait, Rage, you're finished, right?
I mean, I had one more thing, but
Okay,
minimum wage.
Are you sure?
Well, I was just gonna say that I think that minimum wage shouldn't be like, you can have a federal minimum wage, but I think that we should pay attention to the different costs of living and like everything that goes on in different locations.
Oh boy, that's a separate fight. All right, let's go to PB.
Yeah. So I just wanted to represent an anarchist perspective, and I'm not sure what that other position that was labeled anarchist was. Not sure it would even be considered anarchist, but just because anarchists are ultimately have the values of like considering the nation state to be an unjust institution. It's not that like you would ask for it to be eliminated tomorrow. Like that's not a really coherent position. And so even just advocating for decentralization, like just axiomatically, it doesn't really make sense in this context too, because by giving like this a state within the United States is still a hierarchical entity, and it's couched within like a larger one, and so you're just rearranging where the locus of power and authority is within still a hierarchical structure. It's like when a state breaks up into multiple states, it's not necessarily that like the world got more anarchist just because there were more decentralization.
How do you address what I'm sure is the concern from people like Sevatar, which is that decentralization, in many cases it can be a boon. I think Rage mentioned in situations in which experimentation, among other policy goals, can be bettered by having split the atom of sovereignty. But how do you address concerns by Sevatar that decentralization can cause huge problems, like in the context of the pandemic? If you're proposing a more disparate and less hierarchical structure where there's even less uniform action and more problems with respect to collective action problems, how do you address those kind of global threats?
Yeah, that's a great question. I'll get to the pandemic thing. I'll start with saying that I'm a pragmatic person and take things by case basis. Some things make sense for the states to have the authority here, and there's better outcomes when the federal government has the authority here. Like as an anarchist, I support Social Security and I support things like federal jobs programs and stuff, but I also support things like if the outcome is that the states have more authority and there's a better outcome, then I'm for that. So just like,
can I ask why?
Whatever the easiest way to get to the part where everyone is vaccinated, let's just go with that. Like,
so then where does the anarchy come in? I mean, you say you're an anarchist.
Can I respond? Because I'm also an anarchist.
Okay,
I think I can help provide some aspect here. So you see, as an anarchist, what we fundamentally are against is the state. We aren't against government and organization itself. So, like, for example, the institutions of vaccination, the institutions of like the CDC would be a good thing under an anarchist organization. But what happens is we want to take away the monopolistic, violent aspect of hierarchy and power. So, for example, like the idea is having organizations that exist to like research vaccines, produce vaccines. Those are good things. but we want to remove the ability to enact violence upon the citizenry.
Yeah, like
So,
I
like,
don't believe in
yeah.
sticking the cops on someone for not complying, even though it might be, you know.
Well, I can't hear you at all.
So these would exist only as advisory organizations, though. They wouldn't exist as like organizations that have any force behind what their actions are, right?
Force isn't the only way to go
But what I'm
about
saying is these organizations under an under an anarchist system would be only advisory in nature.
Yeah. Like organizations would only be advisory, but collectively we would all organize and like social pressures, like pressurize like our fellow citizens into like taking the vaccine.
Isn't this
Like,
literally
just
the
like,
exact saying that?
Don't admit someone to university unless they're vaccinated. That kind of policy.
Yeah.
Pisco, why do you do
But
this to me?
that isn't
What
that
do you mean
the
what I
same
do
thing
to
as
you?
essentially
We're trying to talk
enforcing
about federalism. You got them down
or
to
coercing
anarchy
them?
again. God damn it, dude.
This is
But, like,
called the true state of nature.
Battle
So-
of the true anarchist.
we are. So I want
That's
to.
because we never asked.
Yeah, I want to kind of
We
say how
never
this.
asked the question if we are okay with federalism, right?
Oh, I guess
Well,
we haven't asked
federalism-
that, but
No.
Okay, federalism is decentralized government. So like at the end of the day, like if you get rid of the federal government and then like just have a bunch of states, they all likely would like either be unitary government or like some sort of like confederacy or like federal government. Like most countries fit within like on some sort of spectrum between like the two, like between confederacy, which would typically be like the least centralized, and then like unitary, which would be like, you know, basically just one country
Why are you
government
trying
style.
to set up a binary?
It's a spectrum, my
It's not
dude.
a
He's not
binary,
setting a
spectrum.
binary. He's explicitly making it not a binary, and he's saying
No,
that.
but
there's-
by saying a dichotomy between decentralized and centralized government, that's creating a binary.
Well, what else could it be? I
But
mean,
I
something
never
is.
but, like,
said,
governments
I never
exist
said it
across
was
the spectrum.
centralized in the
Yeah,
first
he
place.
said that
Like
spectrum.
you could have.
He's introducing the spectrum.
Yeah.
It's not even a spectrum. They're all different. You
so
can't
neither-
place them on a line. There is
I
no
mean,
continuum.
you generally can. You can
This is a
like,
bit.
like-
This is a bit bad faith, I think. Take on his position and his outline. He's just saying that governments are more or less centralized. I don't know how you can take issue with that fact.
Yeah, to
Okay,
word
I
it.
just misheard.
my point is that
Rather
like
not be.
so no, you could in any given form or structure of people, whether it be your household, whether it be your wife, your relationship in that case, or your relationship, all right, with an entire country as a whole or a nation, doesn't matter. All right. At the end of the day, you have a spectrum between like whomst has like the keys to power, essentially within any given society. Okay. And
No.
often and
No one has
oftentimes
the keys.
what do you mean?
What? Just
I mean, no one has the right to have those keys.
Okay, great.
rights don't matter here.
Okay.
What gives somebody rights? At the end of the day, that's power.
Okay,
so it doesn't
just to
matter.
clarify,
It doesn't matter.
We're moving away from the subject again.
But yes, this is kind of derailing from the subject. So like, why don't we just keep it to this? Like anarchist memes. At the end of the day, aside, like I don't see for us to what the relevant distinction here is. Like I feel as if like an anarchist society could be federal. Could it not also be like unitary? Like with regards to its government structure?
It could not be federal.
Okay. Sorry. We'll work it out. We'll work it out. Stop. We'll work it out later. Go ahead, Ty. I know you really wanted to get on the subject, so go ahead.
Yeah, I appreciate it. This conversation comes into two different calculus. The first one is just like the efficiency calculus, what works well on the large scale, what works well on the small scale. I'll give you infrastructure seems to work very well on the large scale. That's your interstates. Idaho can't build the interstates by itself. It needs everybody else to be together to build that out, to fund it, to pay for it, that kind of thing. On the other side of this is that there's some things that I would argue that are just better at it. And I know I'm going to get you prime on this one, but minimum wage really is a lot better on the local level, in my opinion. And then the other side of this is that there's a moral and ethical values judgment here, right? Because if you say, all right, the state can get away with this or that, it can come in direct confrontation with what you believe is the right thing to do. So you might have something going right in your state that you think needs to be spread out to the rest of the union, but doesn't go vice versa. Abortion, anyone? It's one of those deals where this largely just falls into, can you withstand? Can you tolerate? Literally, this is the principle of tolerance. Can you tolerate people having political laws and theory that are violating of your moral and ethical framework.
Not to mention that I see value in the fact that, like, hey, if the federal government, okay, or like any sort of like state government makes a fucky policy, at the end of the day, people can move. Obviously, like you can move away from the United States. That's a lot harder to pull off. Okay, so within the current structure, if like say Georgia creates a law that you disagree with, there's always the opportunity to move to Alabama, always the opportunity to move to Massachusetts.
That's a stupid argument.
Or
I mean,
any one of the
who
other
cares about that?
states.
Those,
It's not. It's not a stupid argument.
Yeah, it is dumb because you're incurring transaction costs regardless. You know, if first of all, as a matter of just practicality, a lot of these people can't move or won't because of other collateral circumstances.
The entire black population like moved from the south essentially up north because of the fact that they were being oppressed.
As a matter of practicality, I'm just letting you know, not everyone
today.
can move. And furthermore, regardless of whether or not everyone can move, they incur transaction costs by their leaving.
Nobody's
which are felt,
disagreeing with that.
Okay, which are felt by everybody.
So that doesn't exist with regards to the federal government.
So it'd be but it would be better to have the right policy in the first instance, and to not incur those transaction costs. And so saying you can just move, ignore is an excuse not to think.
But
you're
that's
ignoring
not
the
what
problem.
I'm saying. What I'm
then I'm
saying
misunderstood.
is that I understand that governments will, at all levels, make fucky decisions. Now, I don't necessarily know if the federal government is particularly more likely to make fucky decisions, or the state governments would. I would err on the side that the state governments, generally speaking, especially from what I see today, are more likely to make bad policy. However, I see value in the fact that, like, at least for the few cases where the federal government, I know for a fact they did, you can't move. There is no opportunity to move. When a state does something bad and you disagree with it, you don't like their tax policy, you don't like their stance on abortion, the opportunity to move arises, which doesn't exist to the same extent with the federal government. And because of the fact that, like, unless you renounce your citizenship, the IRS will always fucking come for you. Now, luckily, most countries, they have double tax agreements. But obviously, like, these types of opportunities to move away from the United States, okay, does not.
But it's not always the case as you
in the
present.
same way as the States.
So one is, first of all, you have to sort of cut. In which way does that cut, right? Because if you have the right policy, it affects everyone, of course. And then also, it's just a matter of law. It's not true. I mean, the United States can set a standard for whatever the criminal procedural right is for the country, and it can be a low standard. States are free to go above that. If it's like a minimum, they can have more protective rights. They can choose not to ban abortion, or they can imagine that the Constitution says you don't have a right to have an abortion. Your individual state can, imagine that's the wrong rule, and we think that's the wrong rule. Your state could have a protective right that gives you the right to abortion. So it's just not the case that states can choose to be more protective if they want to.
But that's not my point. Was that, like, it's very obvious that state governments are more likely to do the wrong thing. But even in spite of this,
before you were just guessing. Now it's very obvious that they're more likely to do the wrong thing.
Well, okay. Do you think that, like, anything with regards to, like, voter suppression is going on at the, like, same level at the federal level? It does. The opportunity doesn't.
Who's in charge of voting in federal elections? Do you know?
The states.
The state.
Well, not just the states. Do you guys know what part of the Constitution dictates that? I mean, in Article 1, there's this really nice Article 1, I believe Section 2 or Section 4, where states can regulate. But Congress is free to come in and change rules, and they have rules on campaign finance.
Okay,
they have
but, like,
rules on the day
not
of the election.
Argument.
Okay,
the argument isn't over whether or not the federal government or both. It's essentially like some sort of mixture between the two, where, like, they have the right to regulate. Nobody's contending with that. The fact that the federal government isn't doing this in the first place is already, like, indicating my point.
But then there's a federal. You said the state governments are the ones who are usually doing the wrong thing. But
these laws, yes.
Okay. But now you're criticizing the federal government's lack of action.
Like, what is particularly, like, controversial here about state governments being more likely to fuck up?
Well, I think it's just like a conclusory statement that before you didn't seem too confident about, and now you do seem fairly confident about.
Typically, I prefer to just come from a point of weakness.
Okay. Well, I think you would be better served, like, discussing globally, who is institutionally competent to handle. And I think that the way that Tiberius was going was the right approach than just kind of having a prior that state governments in the main are more likely to fuck up. I think it's better to think about, institutional competency in domains of legislation.
And, like, they are wildly different. It would seem it would seem like obvious that like there's just more of an opportunity to pass laws at the state level, thus more opportunities to fuck up.
I'm questioning your methodology of evaluating the merits of federalism. I think the question is, in what hands should we put any individual power? And I think Tiberius's method of analyzing the issues is much more productive than just having these global statements like X entity is better or worse generally.
Can I put the brakes on your inquisition here for a second?
Sure.
Okay, appreciate it. Yeah, Big. I'm like, I think I'm getting to the root of your like what you're arguing here, and that is like at the genesis is that because you have more states and you have more opportunities to fuck up, you're going to see more fuck ups. The problem is like this is a very basic logical fallacy to me, where it literally is a reaction in scale. If you have more opportunities, even with a similar error rate, you're going to see more errors as a net
And
effect.
said proportionally that like one particular government is or is like X is more likely to fuck up. I like obviously we don't have the numbers on hand. I'm just saying significantly more laws are passed at the state level. All I know is like a hell of a lot more gets done there. Thus, all right, if there is an opportunity to fuck up, most likely be there. That's it. Now,
No, I completely understood that was your point, and my rebuttal was that if you just assume that the federal government and the state governments have the same level of general competency, and then you math that out because
they
the
don't.
state.
I would presume that the state governments oftentimes are way less competent.
Okay, then that's where that conversation has to go, and you have to explain that one.
Sure.
Well, you said the state governments pass
like,
more laws, but are also less competent than the federal government, which doesn't.
I thought that like
you can do that. Wait, what?
Yeah, the competency part obviously is like a necessity. I thought that was kind of implied. What I'm saying here is that, like there are a whole lot more. There's only one federal government, and there are a whole lot of states that are like are equivalent to West Virginia and Alabama with regards to how they govern.
Could be just describing states that you disagree with. You're kind of begging the question.
It's not describing states that I disagree. It's describing states that like literally are like akin to, in many cases, all right, poor European countries. These states like have a history of like being the most oppressive towards like minorities. Okay,
that's being generous for European countries.
I agree.
Vested interest in ensuring that like they oppress minorities so they can retain their power structures. Yeah, like. I don't think that that's like me just naming states I disagree with.
No, but I'm questioning your method of analysis because you're, on the one hand, you're not discussing. Certain states do really, really well at legislating. They go way beyond whatever the federal standard is in terms of employment discrimination, or they'll provide minimum wages that are much higher. You're looking at the bad cases, and you're like, wow, states do a really shitty job. And I agree. In general, I think the federal government should be a lot more active in different places. But it sounds like you're discounting the good work done in states that you agree with, and you're not factoring that in.
So
is that fair, or is that?
What do you? So like, I think Massachusetts is like a very good example for the most part. Okay, there's absolutely like many cases where they fuck up, but like is an example of like a state with like relatively speaking less fuck ups than a lot of other states.
Sure.
Okay. Now my point is like it's great that everybody has the opportunity to move to Massachusetts. Now I understand individuals might not have the capital, or anything could go wrong that prevents an individual from moving to Massachusetts or whatever. Okay, and my point here is that that just doesn't exist, at least to the same extent, with the federal government. If like we had open borders with Canada, great, perfect like opportunity. Like if the federal government is pressing you, just move away. Okay, but we don't.
Mm-hmm. So I understand what the supremacy clause is, and I understand what I've explained to you now that there's certain policies that states actually can regulate above whatever the federal standard is. I don't know what your response is to that point.
I never contend with that. Like that wasn't ever my contention.
So I think we're left with a collection of states that do really shitty things, a collection of states that do like really good things.
I agree.
And so like between them, assess the problem. Like to what extent should states have powers, and if you're just pointing at bad states and like saying haha you're doing a bad job, I think you're missing the states that are doing a good job, and you're missing a broader. Listen, I'm not making an argument one way or the other. I'm just assessing the method that you're making your argument, and I think you get a lot more work done talking about sort of the specific domains of regulation that you think should be in the hands of the states versus the federal government. For instance, like you might think whatever individual rights are, whatever criminal procedures, that is entirely in federal hands. Or maybe you think, anything related to tax policy, separate and apart from like income taxes, that's really the states. Or minimum, or what Tiberius said, minimum wage should be locally focused because that's where the cost of labor and capital, that's where it's most likely to be internalized.
So
Those
we
are the
could-
kind of, I think interesting in-depth conversations about institutional competency, and not this kind of broad spectrum. Look at the shitty things that Alabama
Well, sure,
do.
but like at the end of the day, that conversation will always, on any given issue, it's like, say, healthcare. Well, what's most efficient? What can be most practically achieved? And
Yeah, so then you would be like, yeah, federal government should be in charge of healthcare.
You'd ask that question, and then you'd be like, oh, okay, well, like it would seem as if right now the best, like maybe a public option or like Medicare for all, whatever, like a study you pull out, okay, to indicate these types of factors. But like that's not the debate right now. Right now it's just a broad debate about like states' rights, and I'd always err on the side of just saying neutral, even if like the federal government had an equal level of fuck up to that of the state government, even though I don't believe that, I would still err on the side of states' right just from a neutral standpoint, simply because of the fact that you have the opportunity to move away if that state government's doing something wrong.
So
Wordy, go ahead.
okay. So there's a lot going on here, and I'm really fucking confused. Like, Cisco, Big Do, I feel like you guys are talking past each other to some extent, because I feel like as a general whole, you all agree, but I don't.
You sound really quiet, dude. I don't know what's going on with your mic. You're like super quiet. I'm not
Me?
sure. Yeah, you.
Oh, okay. I'll try to speak louder. Let me turn this up just a little bit. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay. So I'm really fucking confused, because what happens is I feel like you guys both generally agree that the states have like a lot of series of problems, but I'm not seeing a lot of specifics in which you're getting bogged down in. Like Cisco, like I personally disagree with the idea of minimum wage should be on a state level, because what happens is a lot of corporations are more efficiently organized across national lines, and that makes it much more hard for state level organization of like workers and such to be able to effectively like bargain for a minimum wage. So I feel like if we get organized on a national level, we can like more effectively compete against corporations in order to achieve a minimum wage, because ultimately the enemy in that instance is not the government, but the people who are manipulating the government in that instance.
Yeah, in any particular, I agree that there should be a $15 minimum wage, a federal minimum wage, and I'm in favor of raising it. My critique with Big wasn't necessarily with the answer to any particular problem. It was his frame of looking at the issue, which seemed to be rather cursory and slapdash, if I may say so.
Okay, so in that instance, would you agree that because like just like on a statistical level, if you have more things being done, so like for example, if more laws are passed, then you're more likely to have a greater standard error of issues. Like for example, like whenever a company makes a product, the more they produce, they're bound to have more things that go wrong as a general trend.
Yeah, so the point, I think Big's good point, which is the tendency for error in laws. The more laws you make, you're likely to see that borne out in states, because that's where most of the laws are. And I think that is a salient point. But let's we shouldn't get over the fact that there are a lot of mistakes, gaps, and bullshit in federal laws too.
Yeah, and I very much agree with that.
Yeah. So as a general matter, if I were to give my affirmative position, I would say I think we need states. States provide a certain level of protection in certain domains. For instance, in the context of elections, part of the reason why Trump's procedural coup and Trump's efforts to stop the election were not successful in many ways was because our election laws are hyper federalized, and because it's difficult to marshal a large amount of state actors to follow your plans to overturn the election. Similar in the in susceptibility to foreign influence, and so those are unique strengths of the federal system, which I'm happy to talk about. I think that your arguments with respect to economic forces and regulation and the corporations being kind of national, I buy those arguments. And in the case of public goods, I think Big Do was saying in the case of healthcare, I would totally agree that there's so many problems in the market, whatever you want to call that lend themselves towards federal regulation and even federal control domination of healthcare. And so on the merits, any one of those fields of regulation, I'm happy to discuss. I just think we should discuss them and not just the tendency of of any one of those actors to be good or bad in the main. You know, that
Well,
very much depends on your priors about whether they're right or wrong, and depends on which states you're looking at.
Well, the
You
issue
can just look at outcomes. We know for a fact that like outcomes for a child born in Massachusetts versus Alabama it's like hilariously different. And so I think it's obvious that like we can use states as cases for us to like evidence of like either side really. All right. What I'm saying is simply put, okay, is that like again, just look at where it's most efficient. Like obviously I think everybody agrees with this. Nobody's gonna be like, hey, do the thing that's least efficient because of like my weird deontological position that like states have like some God-given right to govern themselves. Okay, I don't think anybody's gonna come from the states' rights argument from that perspective unless they're a moron. All right, but what I think is useful is obviously looking at that case, what's most efficient, plus also recognizing like the federal government or no government is perfect in the way that it acts. All right, so at least if you can minimize the amount of harm that like to the most amount of people, somebody can move. Okay, that exists. That option exists. That's all I'm saying.
Prime, you're looking like you want to say something.
Oh, so this is an argument, something I brought up previously 2 months ago. It's something I saw in the majority report with Sam Cedar. Talked to a guy who was advocating for reorganizing how we look at the states, and that the states are an outmoded way of dividing up the nation, and that you know they were along political lines, right? But these political lines have been long obsolete, right? Like why New York, for instance, is divided the way it is, right? Like oftentimes these are geographical, right? And instead there would be a much more useful way of organizing the country through regions, right? So what we could do, we could take blocks of states, right? The northeastern block, right? The southeastern block, the western block, right? These are regions where people have a lot in common, right? And have similar goals, right? And we could give them more autonomy, possibly, right? To actually get their priorities done. So what the compromise they brought up was like, well, the northeastern states, you can have your Medicare for all, right? Like you can actually do that within that block if we make the compromise that, okay, if you get to have that, then the South gets to ban abortion. Like, is that like a worthwhile compromise? Because right now we're just not getting anything done, right? We can see like
I would take neither. I would just
hold on, let me just finish that point. We can see the amazing, incredible gridlock that we have within our Congress, in which we have these states who are fighting each other endlessly and grinding all progress to a halt. So if we reorganize ourselves and say, like, all right, well, with the power of the backing of the federal government to these states to accomplish their goals, right? Saying that we'll form this units, and we'll still have one single army. That's very important. One single army. But that part's important. But beyond that, you could still accomplish all kinds of great legislative goals and not be held back by regional cultural differences, right? And so let the southern states fucking burn, basically, is what I'm saying.
Hey, I live here. I don't have a choice.
Okay.
That's how, you know. Hey, just move. That's what Big Dude said.
I don't have a choice to move right now.
I'm just messing with you. But go ahead.
Burn your state down before you burn mine.
Go ahead, Ty, and then we'll go to Want.
Yeah, I've actually, or the first part, as far as like reorganizing the states, I'm actually in favor of this. I've been saying something on the lines of that. Although I just think they need, no, seriously, I think they need redrawn because the earlier states, the colonial states, like, you know, Rhode Island, Massachusetts, that kind of thing, they're all incredibly small for the size that they have. They don't represent their geography. It's basically across the nation. It's all political.
Geography?
Yeah.
What the fuck do you care about
I
geography?
didn't know. Well, who cares?
They split up California.
Because as the geopolitical guy here is that geography affects how a society develops. And if you actually draw the borders along those geographic lines, you'll actually find that people are far more represented because of the way that they operate.
Geography has nothing to do with like how big has nothing to do with how big your state is. What's relevant with regards to government in this case would be like how many people you represent within those borders. Now, geography, like certain futures, like, hey, this place is very rural, okay, or it has a lot of like fertile land, right? Thus, like, there's a lot of farming going on versus, like, I don't know, like some random state like Wyoming, all right, which has its own particular unique geographical or geographical circumstances, okay, that might differ from the Northeast. The relevant factor would be like, hey, how many people are in your country or in your borders?
So let's go to. So before we do that, I just want to get to Womp. Womp's been waiting very patient. I want to get that in, but don't worry, we're not gonna escape this point because I want to get back to it. Go Womp. If you're talking, we can't hear you. We can't hear you, buddy. You're muted somewhere, not in Discord. Or else you're muted. Want to give it another try?
He's not even talking. That's crazy.
He was trying. I think he's trying to unmute himself. Womped? Nope, you're still muted, buddy. Sorry, buddy. I don't know what's happened. Yeah, if you could.
Anarchist internet finally gave out.
Anarchist internet, that's what it is. Okay. Well,
I'm taking over.
Okay. We'll come back to you, Womps. Okay, we'll come back to you.
This policy that you're proposing, Prime, is never going to happen, and it's stupid to consider.
No,
that's what I mean.
Okay, hold on.
Well,
okay,
is it far fetched?
I'm here for it.
Is it far fetched? Sure. Like, I mean, that completely upends the entire Senate and all that other shit. The other side of this is that, like, I'm actually going to agree with this major characteristic is that the states are fuckered. Texas and California should not have 2 senator seats. They should have a lot more. They're too fucking big. They should absolutely be split up.
No
they
argument would be fair. Yeah, I
right.
mean,
yeah, like
split up California.
Like if you actually drawed states on like any kind of geographic lines, Texas would be 3 states, New England 5 would actually be 1 state. You would actually find that the Senate and the House would both represent their people better if you actually drew it with some common sense. But the original sense that the thing that I was trying to say,
this is what I'm advocating for.
Yeah, I'll get there.
Or more or less.
The earlier states are founded off the settler period, or I'm sorry, the colonial period, so they're all fuckered in that regard. And then the race west is all about slavery. So all those states are drawn in just the most fuckered ways possible.
Yeah, and Pisco, I take 1 second. Pisco, gotta yeah, I take a shot at you. First of all, the way that we've organized states has changed drastically in this country, right? I mean, we used to have a confederate view of things, correct? Right? The states used to have a lot more autonomy. And then after the Civil War, right, we redrew the compact, right, between the states, and that no, we're under this one federal government. But even then, we've had certain relations and certain allegiances between political blocs. This would be formalizing them, right? Formalizing this. I mean, the southern states have always kind of acted together, especially since the Civil War. They've acted together for lots of
fucking rebels.
Yeah, exactly.
Dirty traitors.
Dirty fucking traitors. But so this will be formalizing them and then making sure they don't get in each other's way, right? So again, I don't think it's so far fetched. Like, to get those goals, to get those great progressive values that like a lot of us share here, right? Many of us, there are a lot of goals that we're trying to accomplish within a nation that we just simply cannot with the current political formula we have here, right?
Well, why do you think we can't? Like,
well, so because I'm looking at what we've actually accomplished. We've actually accomplished fucking nothing. We can only at the very best we've done like half-ass compromises, right? So I'm saying like if we limit these things, right? There's so many things that are completely politically impossible. There are other things. So Pisco says this is politically impossible, but there are other things that are politically impossible now because of the current political formula. So if you could change things along, like I think something like Medicare for all, right, would be a lot more possible if it was just if we were just worried about like what the northeastern states wanted, right? Like I think we would agree with that it would be much closer to making that a possibility. Great. So that's just one or environmental regulations, right, that we desperately want to get passed, right? That would be much more easier, or like regulating drugs, right? All these things it would be much more easier if we could just look at this one block, right? And then the other blocks, right, who have a different view of things, do what they want. So I don't know why this is so crazy. It's such a crazy idea. Just simply reorganizing, and if you want, you can call it like what Ty said, simply redrawing states, right? Like if that's what you want to do. But
we just have 3 big states.
Why? But why? I don't see why we are. The point is, and I'll let you go in, Big Joe, because I want to hear what you have to say. The point is, why are we so tied to these old lines that were drawn on a map, right? They were drawn literally hundreds of years ago, right? for a different time, for different reasons. We can understand things have changed, right? The political lines have changed. The battlefield has changed. So why don't we redraw the battle lines? Go ahead.
So I see a lot of value in what you're talking about. Like I like from an ideal standpoint, I'd be like, yeah, great, do this. But the issue is, of course, like A, probably won't ever happen, and B, like it requires a lot of effort. When in reality, with regards to what most progressive people want, with regards to this is like Medicare for all or like some sort of public option, increasing the minimum wage. The issue is that like America is just like wildly undemocratic at least at the federal level, and because of the fact that like each state, okay, gets like 2 Senate seats. All right, if we were to instead like focus our efforts on like, I don't know, admitting Washington D.C., restoring the Voting Rights Act, okay, ensuring that like mail-in ballot or
what's keeping that from happening?
Mail in your ballot.
What's keeping that from happening though? What's the things you just said, right? All those things. What's keeping those things from happening?
What's keeping all those things from happening right now, at least in the case of like Washington
Congress
DC,
legislation.
It's called I'll even give it whether it's the Republican
it would be
Party.
Christian Sinema and Joe Manchin.
No. That's not the only reason. I mean, fuck those two. I mean, like, go to hell. But they aren't the only fucking reasons why it's happening.
Those two people are literally what's holding up most of the legislation.
No, it's not. Hold on. The fact, first of all, they have a filibuster, right? That's part of it, right? And that filibuster is being held up by an intransigent Republican Party that Ty was so kindly to name, right? And that Republican Party largely falls, not entirely, but largely falls the line of the southern states, right? Like, we could redraw things once again, right? For them to be clear, for people to have better representation along those lines. So you named a few things there, and I'm forgetting what you said. Give me one of the things you said. I'm sorry.
Restoring the Voting Rights Act, making Washington D.C. a state.
Yes, Washington D.C. a state. Yes, exactly. Right? Why hasn't that already happened? Right? It's because the southern states, oftentimes the southern states, and a few other states, don't want that to happen. Why? Because there's not fucking enough white people there. Right? There's too many fucking dark-skinned people there, and it's going to go Democratic.
Sure, but like reorganizing the entire state, like the entire structure of the federal government, like again, I agree with this from like an idealistic standpoint. But like I'm saying that like it doesn't at any point seem like particularly likely that it's going to occur.
So okay,
I'm saying that like
the only reason people advocate for Washington
just to
D.C.
clarify.
becoming a state is because they want 2 more Democratic seats in the government.
Yeah, great. It would make the Senate.
Pisco, that's bullshit. That's easily the
dumbest thing I've ever heard. That's the only reason why. How about having some congressional representation for 600,000 plus American citizens in this country?
Just make it part of Maryland then.
Guys,
shut up.
Why don't we just grant that Washington D.C. it should only be admitted because it's going to bring in 2 Democratic seats? Okay, great. The issue is that, like, there are so many more red states, hard left red states, and the Senate's already disproportionately in favor of these smaller states that are oftentimes red. That like admitting Washington D.C. is just making it more fair. It's literally making the Senate more representative of the American population, which is more Democratic than Republican.
What if we redrew the states again? Trying this again. Either my idea, which is not quite redrawing the states, or Ty's idea, which is redrawing the states. What if we redrew those states along population lines, right? So that and there's 2 things before I get to that. There's 2 things. Before that, we have conversations here all the time about like things that are impractical, but we're just wondering like, would this be a good idea? This is one of those conversations. Would this be a good idea, right? Now, is this going to happen tomorrow? Absolutely not, right? This is a brand new concept for many people. There's no way. Yes, you're saying, yeah, this is unlikely to happen. Sure, absolutely. I'm talking about, would this be a good idea? Would this actually
assume you
work?
could do it with no cost is what you're saying.
Yes, exactly.
Right?
And we're exploring the topic. Okay, fair enough. That's fair enough. Okay, but then on the other side, on the other side of it, like, what if we redrew the states? So in terms of population, you're exactly right with what you said in terms of the Senate being skewed to states with very small populations, right? And that causing all kinds of democratic issues. Okay, so what if we redrew the states? So they're better reflective. So you can still have, each state can still have 2 senators maybe, right? And do what Ty was talking about, breaking up California and making that 3, right? Would that be a good idea? Why are we so tied to these old lines drawn on the map? Why are we loyal to these lines that mean nothing, that we could decide, not likely, but we could decide to simply change them?
I agree that these lines are arbitrary with respect to federal representation, and I think that to the extent that you can make the Senate, there's some notion of having a body that is 2 chambers, bicameral legislature. I think that's a good idea, but I agree. Have it tied to population sizes, and just keep states as a concept to for internal state politics, and then you can have the best of both worlds. You have a representative federal legislature and the commensurately representative presidential election, since the electoral votes are based on the state's Senate, the amount of senators they have plus the number of representatives. I think that, you should make it more representative. But I don't favor Prime of having 3 separate countries or 2 separate countries.
No.
It sounds like that's what your solution inexorably leads to, as these different regions become more and more desynchronized, and essentially
they are desynchronized though. But I would say
Prime.
Yeah, you're leaving.
Thank
Thanks
you so much for having me on. I gotta go.
Yeah,
have a great night, everybody.
Great.
Sub to Prime, sub to Prime, sub to Prime.
Thanks so much.
Good to see you, Servitor.
Good to see you guys too.
I would argue with you, buddy. And I see you, Womp. Don't worry, I see you. But I would argue that we already are becoming culturally distinct, right? But we already see that people are moving geographically to areas where other people happen to agree with them, right? We're already shaking out to be that way. We already have, and you know this better than I do, Mr. Soon-to-be lawyer man, right? That within different states, right, in different regions, you'll see that people have different rights. Right. Once we leave it up, anything we leave up to the states, we're having vastly different rights, and we know this especially is most acute when it comes to women's bodily autonomy. This is already happening. It's happening right now. So why not?
Yeah, but there's no danger of the breakage of the union. We fought a war to.
I didn't say that. Yeah, I didn't say that. I didn't say that we were in a breakage. But I'm saying we're becoming
concerned about when we have.
Go ahead, please.
That's what I'm concerned about when there's talk of regional line drawing and making smaller amount of states. It sounds like we're moving the United States away from this, large union really of disparate principalities into 3 or 4 countries, and I think it's not a good idea, because there's utility in having a large country. What would we do with currency, right? So many of I'm
not asking for that, but that's not what I'm asking for. I'm asking for one nation. It's very important. Hold on. One nation, one currency, one military. That part's extremely important. I'll repeat it for a 4th time. One military, or else we will have those problems. Absolutely. And we still have a federal government. And if you're talking about exactly how this will end up shaking out, I'm not exactly sure. But just wondering that, I'm just saying that how we're currently doing things is clearly not working. This endless gridlock that we're having is due because we're voting. We're already voting in this manner, but we don't have the structures to accommodate this, right? We're already voting in regional blocks. Why not accommodate that within the government instead of fighting against it? Is my point. Let's go to WOMT, and don't worry, we'll get to all of you back again, but let's go to WOMT, let's go to PB, let's go to Rage, and then, where did you have your hand up? Ready. Oh.
Yeah.
So it occurs to me that the most common sense way to separate, if you're going to redraw anything, is by watershed, where you take each watershed that people are in and group people together like that. That way, if they have any water problems, they're at least in the same district as the other people they'd be having water problems with.
What? Why? I mean, that's so arbitrary.
Water,
not like anything else.
Is necessarily arbitrary.
Because we need water to live.
No,
Okay.
unironically, he's actually
what
not
is
too
it?
terribly
Right.
far from the mark, but that's of a whole other caliber of conversation.
Okay,
I mean,
so-
you want to base sovereignty on
Oh yeah,
the modern United States on
I
watershed?
forgot about that.
Yeah.
If you go down this route, I'm telling you, Pisco, it's a hole. we've already done
I mean,
it.
you don't even want a government, so I don't know,
ready to
or
go
I
down the
shouldn't say
hole.
that. I don't know if I want a government, but
It's a
I
hole.
suspect
government.
you dabble in non-government having theories. So, like, why why even have anything?
It's a deep dark hole. You're about to go down. Don't do it.
Okay, well,
I'm gay. I've been to the deepest,
honestly,
darkest
like
hole.
I want some arbitrator to be there if you are fucking around upstream from me and ruining my water supply. Because otherwise I might go after you.
Okay.
Oh,
Man. Okay. Thank you, Vaughn. But for you, Pisco, don't worry. I actually want you to answer that question later on. I want to get these other people in first, because I need to do that. But my question in terms of why shouldn't we accommodate what's already happening in terms of our states voting in regional blocks? That's happening right now. Why can't we accommodate that? But I'm going to get these other people first. Go ahead, PB.
Thanks, Prime. Waterworld sounds very strange, but yeah, I think it's an interesting thought experiment. But like in like trying to think about it in like practical context, as opposed to like all history kind of thing, which I really love that kind of stuff, like like Man in High Castle and stuff. So like I think it's interesting to think about, but because I think it's very like politically intractable, like redrawing the state lines isn't something that is so politically distant from us that you have to be like hundreds of years from now.
Is it a good idea? Is it a good idea? Ignore that. Is it a good idea? Ignore that. Is it a good idea?
Is it a good idea?
Yeah.
I think that I would ask for more. So you're saying things like free association. Go even further. Just erase all the lines. And I know that that.
Okay.
Yeah. So like erase all the borders, erase all the lines. Let people organize, or maybe keep the lines but make them not.
So are you more for an anarchist type situation? Is that where you're coming from?
He said he was.
Oh, I missed that. I missed that. I apologize. I missed that.
Yeah,
PPS is based.
Okay.
Roll the world without borders memes, please.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. I didn't realize you were coming from that perspective. All right.
Yeah. So that's like a political vision that anarchists have, to imagine a society where you're minimizing hierarchy as much as possible. You give self-governance to individual
we know. So along what we're talking about now.
I'm not going to go into full anarcho.
Okay.
I'm just saying that like whatever the organization of state and federal governments now facilitates that, like for example, funding from the federal government that goes to the states and then that gets allocated to to public education, infrastructure, to individual communities who can then have some level of autonomy at the local level. Whatever facilitates bottom up as much as possible while we still have this kind of top down system is what I would advocate for.
Okay. Let's go Raid, then Wordy. And then I want to try again for Pisco. See if he'll give me an answer to that question. Go, and then also a big dude, because I'm curious what he has to say there too. Go ahead, Rage.
All right. I kind of have a couple of questions. In going back to the concept of the laboratories of democracy, we have a lot of policies like the Medicare for All or like $50 minimum wage that would otherwise be pushed if there wasn't like resistance from the Republican Party. Why is it that a lot of states don't do these internally? Like why doesn't California, which presumably would vote for Medicare for All, why doesn't California have, which is it's like the most prosperous state in the union, why don't they do this? Because if the argument is grouping a bunch of states together but not having the whole union would allow these things to get passed, I'm questioning if that would actually work.
Sorry,
because
how so? You're saying, say that again. I'm sorry. You're questioning what exactly about it?
Because like if you're saying if we were to break up or group states together and then they could pass whatever they want, we already have states individual that don't pass some of the things that they advocate for federally.
What? So
for like Medicare for All,
yeah,
California doesn't, like, presumably they don't have Medicare for All working on their state level.
I know what you're saying now.
So like,
no, you're making a good point, and this is why you would do this, right? This is exactly why you do this, because many of these states, right, there are things that they would like to do, but they are they work on too small of a scale, right? Like an individual state's economy is not able to do some of these things, these long-term projects. So I brought up Medicare for All specifically because of that, right? Because there are some states who like to do that, but on their level, they can't accomplish it. That's why I'm saying if they were doing this, one, with the economies of multiple states grouped together, they might be able to accomplish these long-term projects, and two, they would have the backing of the federal government, right? So even if these things are projects are working in a local or in a regionalized level, right, it would still have federal backing into these things rather than just a state project with the state level backing. Does that make sense?
Okay.
So,
Okay, with the state.
so,
Okay,
so
I was
the
missing
issue,
the federal backing part.
Yeah.
the issue I think with this is that like, while I think it's obviously more ideal than the system we have, the only issue I'd have is the fact that like, say one state decides it wants to fund X, all right, and this is like obviously a collective of states. All right, they decide that like they want to fund healthcare in, I don't know whether it be the Pacific Northwest or like we're just like just making all of the West Coast.
Yeah.
All right, it doesn't matter. It's just borders. All right, and they decide to do that, and then the other state disagrees. All right,
the other states in that region. The other states in that regional block. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
but like obviously the federal government would have to have some sort of like structure, all right, for collecting tax revenue. So unless if we said, A, this is hands off for the federal government to fund in the first place, I could see a lot of issues arising. But then two, on top of it, you have like this would be a more akin to like the EU. And the big issue the EU had was that since there's no real set fiscal policy, all right, put on individual states, all right, yet there is a linked monetary policy, you could have a whole lot of issues as arise in Greece. Now, like the same thing can occur in the United States, but just not to the same extent, because the federal government's far more overarching than compared to the EU. So if we're going to have the federal government have less of a role on government, the opportunity for these types of things arise, and disputes over like whether or not we ought to pay for these types of things definitely will be more serious, in my opinion. Because it seems like right now, at least, we're kind of okay with like Alabama being tax negative and Massachusetts being tax positive. That seems cool. But what if we're all just a block of countries, or essentially like equivalent to like EU countries, all right, with millions of people, and we're all just trying to fight for our own self-interest. And we're all just trying to get what we can out of this institution.
But that's not what I'm advocating for. I'm not advocating for EU style. I'm not aiming.
I'm saying it would be more akin to it.
I don't think it would. I don't think your comparison is apt here. And what we were talking about in terms of monetary policy, we could have a unified monetary policy. Just like there's what we're currently doing, what we've been arguing about, like states' rights.
A single fiscal policy.
Yeah, we can have a single fiscal policy if you wanted, right? We can. So just like right now, we're talking about what should and should be within the purview of the states, right? You can talk about like what should and should be in the purview of the regions, right? And something that shouldn't be in their purview is having their own military. I'm going to keep saying that because that part's very important.
I hear that.
Yeah, so that's it's just one example, but there are other examples, right? So you can talk about this fiscal policy, right? You could say that because of the reasons you listed or other reasons, we might decide that's outside the purview of the regional blocks, and we could have the federal government still handle that, right? There are lots of things. There are lots of issues that this would raise, 100%. But I think these are all things that we could tackle.
But almost all of these things that we're looking to pass right now, say like Medicare for All, are things that, like would have big influence on fiscal policy. So that's the point. It's like, sure, we'd be able or capable of raising taxes to do this if we did it at California, at the California level. It's just that California doesn't want to do it because it makes them a lot less competitive. All right, and this same issue would exist with these governments, but like it would be, in my opinion, a lot worse because they would be expected to do it. But plus, on top of it, all right, now you have states that or entire blocks of countries, essentially millions of people that now are just looking to see the federal government as a money pot, and that's really what they would serve. I see there being value in the current structure of federal government that kind of ties everybody together.
again, we
If
wouldn't
you
have.
understand what I'm saying.
I think I understand what you're saying. The federal government would tie everyone together. We would not be giving up the federal government, and like many
I
of
get
its.
that.
No, I don't think you do, because the fact that you even said that, like, no, we still, and this what I'm proposing, there would still be a federal government that would still, so we'd still be one nation, right? But we'd simply be formalizing what we've already seen now, people voting, states voting in regional blocks, and I know there are a few things there. It's gonna take me time, but I'll come back to you. Maybe we can duke that out more. I want to get to Pisco because I know he's not feeling too great, so I want to make sure I get his answer before he dips out. Pisco. Yeah.
So the question is, assume no transaction costs, assume no cost of implementation. So I just want to flag for the audience here that is a tremendous thing to assume, right? And I just want to, in many ways, like, think about so much of our laws are structured around statehood. Statehood is built into the Constitution. You're talking about an up and down, like, reglow or glow up of the Constitution in a way that is totally unprecedented, and even compared to the civil rights, the Civil War amendments, like, this is on quadrillion level scales above that. Okay, maybe not quadrillion, maybe like a couple dozen levels above that. All right. So
is there any mechanism for states to join together? Because, like, we have, I think, a mechanism for, like, splitting states
there
apart.
actually is in the Constitution. You do need, like, approval of the constituent states, and I don't believe it's ever been done before. Yeah, but there are rules. Like, think about the amendments. For the most part, amendments need to be done either with the initiative of the states or have the approval of the states. And so these state actors are never going to give up their power, and they won't consent to it because they don't want to be a small fish in a big pond, or they'll lose their legislature. They won't have the ability to control their, whatever they're controlling. So it's, we're assuming a lot when we're assuming there's no cost here.
I disagree with that last point, but go ahead, please.
Even if I assumed, that I agreed with you in the abstract,
okay,
the real costs and practical concerns would be enough for me to get rid of it. But now let me address the sort of Nirvana-esque ideal of, what if we could reorder without cost?
Stop ruining our fun, damn it.
Yeah, right? Oh, he's a high party pooper.
No, look, I 100% support Pisco on this. Like, I do not expect it to ever happen, but it's one of those deals where if I could ever, like, push the narrative, it's like, yeah, maybe we should redraw the states. These are completely antiquated. They're out of date.
Okay. Well, I think that people's lives and how they order themselves should be given primacy, but we're putting aside the practical concerns. We're living in where everyone agrees with us all the time, and if everyone agrees with us all the time, I'd be an anarchist too. Like, why even have a government? But sort of taking you at face value, Prime, I think one of the geniuses of the constitutional design was it recognized that one of the biggest threats to our union was precisely having
other states,
different regions that are, like, too powerful and grow too powerful and too separated from each other, and that they would become regional forces, and, like, eventually either start a war or split up.
Oh, which happened, which exactly was happened. So clearly that didn't work. So
okay.
No, what Pisco is arguing here is that you're actually, if you go with what you're wanting, is that you may very well supercharge that to where it happens again.
No, but but on our path now, that can still happen.
Well, no, I'm not going to say, look, you're absolutely right that it happened in the past. What Pisco's advocating is that if you did the more regional union thing, which actually I think we might end up going down anyway, is that you could hyper accelerate where we do this all over again. And this time the stakes are a little higher because Texas is just going to nuke California.
Well, why? Important to Prime's argument is unitary military control. And my fear is by I don't know what federal policy would look like. Maybe you would consider these regions only as autonomous as states are now, and they're just bigger states. And that kind of removes, in my mind, a lot of the genius of having multiple states, which is this kind of experimentation thing. That seems kind of out the window.
You could still have that. I can still have that.
Prime, were you about less states?
No, I wasn't talking about less states, but people keep getting confused with that. So to make it clear, Pisco, right? I'm not talking about having less states. Each individual states within the block, right?
Oh.
So there are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I address it?
Sure.
Oh, so are you
For
saying
me-
there's another layer?
Yeah, another layer.
power-
Adding another layer, basically. Yes.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Okay.
Maybe I'm explaining it poorly. That might be my fault.
Oh, okay, that makes way more sense.
Power is a zero-sum game, and so
No.
the power is coming from. Okay, time. Here.
No.
The power is coming from. There's a whole pizza, right?
Mm.
That whole pizza represents all governmental power, and that pizza you can divide it however you want, but you're never gonna get more pizza, right? You're given one big pizza, and you giving power to some other regional autonomous zone.
No.
Power away from other actors.
Are we talking about just in the straight up political form that there's only 100 senators, there's never any more, there's never any less?
No, I mean one level of generality above that. So
okay,
in
But what about
general,
House
right?
representatives?
No. Look, Pisco, do this, please.
Yeah. So what I'm saying is the amount of power and control that you have in any given area, geographical or otherwise, is limited. It's finite, and you, whenever you're giving power to some other body, you're taking power away from someone else. It's either you're taking away power from the people, or from the state organizations, or from the federal government. And so my question is, from whom are you taking this power? Are you taking it, the power to regulate interstate commerce away from Congress so that each state region could have that power? I mean, who is losing in this equation? Who's losing the power?
Okay, yeah, this is where I might get lost in the weeds with you on this, is that while you're absolutely right that there's levels of jurisdiction that contradict one another and that you have to divvy that up and the existential or the core thesis that you put out there was that power is a zero sum is definitely not the case. We can talk about how Texas is growing to a level that they're getting 3 more representatives. We're going to see 2 or we're going to see multiple states lose that just as part of our given system. Is that the inevitable calculus that you look at here is that each political institution is not constrained to a specific scale. It can grow, it can shrink, it can change, it can completely rework exactly how it works. So that's where I want to fight you.
Power in the entire country is finite, is what I'm saying, right?
Finite, yes, but it does not mean that the factors of
you can adjust power levels, relatively speaking. But
yes,
any representation that Texas gets is representation that other people lose. That's what I mean when I say zero sum. And the ultimate power, just the ability to do whatever you want all the time and regulate everyone's life, and people have no rights and and then just one person has rights.
That's fine. That's fine. I'll concede that final point.
So
okay, yeah. So
who
are you taking power away from?
I would say that we not. It depends. It depends. Maybe I am taking power away from someone.
You are, but you are, because if a state imagine you have a region, right?
Yeah.
And Massachusetts, New York, and like Connecticut and Massachusetts, they disagree on like a lot of shit.
Yeah.
If you like look at the laws, they're like totally different. So you're essentially giving this region either the power to supplement whatever state laws is. Now the states don't have that authority anymore, or you're taking power from the federal government to regulate, whatever domain has supremacy clause authority over that region, and you're taking it away from whatever unitary government that is. So that power is coming from somewhere, and it's coming from
No. So okay, once again, I think Medicare for All is the perfect example for this, right? It is a big project, right? That a state like, let's say, Rhode Island, if Rhode Island wanted to do it, and I'm not sure if Rhode Island does, but let's say Rhode Island wanted to do that, Rhode Island would be completely outmatched. Like it just won't be able to do it on the scale of its economy. Okay, right? So Rhode Island and a couple of like-minded states were in a block, right? Then on that level, on this matter, they agree. Let's work collectively. So it's collective organization on another scale, right? So we have decided, like the states of Pennsylvania, New York, Rhode Island, New Jersey, right, Delaware, that we are within this block, and we want to accomplish this big project, right? Whether it's like some infrastructure project that's just too big, too expensive for a single state on its economy. Let's all get together. Let's make this happen, right? So we're not taking power away from, at least my understanding. Maybe I'm wrong about this. So we're not taking power away from the federal government, right? We're saying that we're giving states more power, right, to accomplish things that they could not do on their own. Does that make sense? I hope it does.
The reply from Pisco largely is going to fall along this, if I may, Pisco, is that you're absolutely right in that you can empower a regional union to do something more because the federal government can, and you can get these regional blocks to do more because they will have the collective power to do so. This is the the benefit of economies of scale. The other side of this, where this all tends to go to hell, is that if you are Rhode Island in this regional union, you're basically subjugated to New York. In that,
No, you don't.
Is that
why?
Oh hell yeah!
For projects you disagree
Well, you'd
with,
have
you
to
don't have.
agree. You'd have to agree in the
Yeah,
first place.
yeah. The bloc would have to agree. Not that the bloc dictates to the states. Like the states, it will be, I guess, a confederacy, like a confederacy within the union, right?
Right. You can do that, but if you're going to be part of any kind of greater regional union, you are subject to the majority of whatever that regional union is. Is that if you have just simply more people in New York and Pennsylvania, they're going to call the shots more than you are in Rhode Island. That is the problem with this whole conversation with federalism.
That's
is
true
that
of literally any government.
Yes, it is. Is that the bigger the bitch gets,
Then
the
what's the
more
issue
that
with this
you are
specific one?
the more that you are subject to the general will of the majority that is
So
present.
what if then let's imagine for a second, it's not exactly what I'm advocating for. Let's imagine for a second that we had like a secondary Congress, right? Like within there, and each state had like one or two whatever representatives within that a block Congress, and the states had to agree, right? So if the states don't agree, then like it's not even, we could say you may have to form a consensus rather than like being outvoted simply like by one, you know? I mean,
I know exactly what you're saying.
Yeah, there's all kinds of ways to cut this pie.
What you're really advocating for, at least in my opinion, and I don't what I'm looking at is that you're taking the federal government, you're putting another level between the federal government and the states to basically be like a secondary level here, because the federal government isn't doing shit, which I agree with you on, and that you have the innate same problem that you have with the federal government, just on a more local region. You're going to probably find more commonalities within that region, and so they can work together to get that done. However, the trade-off is that whoever is still the minority in that union is going to be subject to more often to the people that are the bigger institutions within that.
Okay.
That's always the problem with any kind of economy of scale in bigger government, is that you trade your individual autonomy and liberty and freedom the bigger it gets, because you get to have nice things.
Well, okay. And I think maybe that trade-off, if that is indeed the trade-off that I'm making, then I think it might be worth it. This is my argument here. But no, that's
a good argument. I think you have a good thing to stand on. It's like, all right, cool. Yeah, you might have to give up a little bit of what you want to do in particular Rhode Island, but free Medicare for all.
Yeah,
sounds good, man.
What I think. Okay, go ahead. You haven't gone in a while.
Yeah. So I think there's also a level of distinction that exists here, because we are having a regional groupings that effectively have more political pressure and ability to effectively implement policy. I think that's how you're advocating Prime. And from there, I think the issue that also comes down to it is a means of proportional representation of voices and opinions in that instance, because what happens is our current system works, senators and House of Representatives, but it's not the House of Representatives comparatively is more effective because it has a more significant number, and it has a more proportional representation across the United States. And I think in that instance, you also have to institute that, for example, you're looking at parliamentary systems, while they have their own inherent flaws, I think there's some greater value comparatively because they are a more proportion-based representation. And I think you would also have to include that within this context too, to make a more effective and more fair representation.
Anyone else? And we could talk about something else too. I thought it was an interesting proposal. Go ahead.
I really like the idea, generally speaking, especially in the case of municipalities. We can look at it. For example, I think the main thing I'd use to refute this is the fact that individual municipalities come together all the time. Okay, that are wildly different from one another and have wildly different interests, come together and create things like BART, Bay Area Rapid Transit. Okay, same thing in Washington. Washington DC's transit system essentially literally serves 3 different states.
So it's clearly very possible to get differing people in like this type of block together and agree upon certain things. It wouldn't necessarily even need like that much constitutional change. They could just delegate, okay, these are certain authorities that we provide to this like this arbitrary government structure that we've created, okay, and we're gonna give, I don't know, whether it be transit, healthcare, they have the power to do X, and we're going to fund X based on whatever mechanism we have to like represent this body. There's no reason why this couldn't occur. I think that like we should do more of this, actually. A lot more of it.
That's actually just some question of whether or not that arrangement would be constitutional, and then my guess is that it would not be. There's certainly Congress is limited to what it can delegate. There's a non-delegation doctrine. Admittedly, it's rather thin in recent years, but I'm sure that any delegation of a large amount of legislative authority would posit some stoppage or an injunction from a federal court very quickly. And the same thing with state authority. If anyone brings a claim, right? If anyone is potentially injured, if they have standing to bring a suit, I'm sure a federal court would enjoin or at least would hear cases about how this is unconstitutional. So don't kid yourself. Any kind of arrangement like this, regional, whatever, if it's binding, right? Would require, I think, either great lawyering or constitutional reworks.
Well, I mean, if BART right now isn't unconstitutional, or the MTA isn't unconstitutional, even though like all these types of systems go across a wide variety of states, and like municipalities are literally just a creature of the state government for the most part, it seems.
They're creatures of particular state governments, and it's not wholesale delegation of sovereignty in the way that I think Prime is envisioning. I mean, Prime is envisioning that this regional body, I presume, will either pass laws with the force of law, or I guess in his mind, everyone just agrees, and then at that point, I guess I don't know what it's doing. All right, great, we can have a UN within the.
What it could look like is, say, like there's at least in my city, all right, in my city, all right, there's a board, okay. All right, and then there would be a board of representatives for like each individual municipality, all right, within the metropolitan area. Okay, so you could have this like just be for individual states. They all elect a member to this board. Like it could be like a president of this board. It could be the president of healthcare within this region. I'm sure we could come up with way cooler names for these agencies.
Within a state, within a state.
No, not within a state. But why couldn't this service also like operate in between state lines? If they just agree, hey, these are the powers I delegate to you. This is what I'm going to pay to you. There you go.
Well,
like, we already do this today.
Interstate compacts and interstate agreements of the sort that you're referencing that I think would face. I'm not saying it's impossible, but I think there would be serious constitutional challenges. You could bring a case in. This is against the structure of the Constitution. The Constitution doesn't allow for these separate unions of states to make sort of substantive law. Yeah, sure, you can have these kind of agreements between states on like, trade or some kind of sharing of certain regulations, or, if you have gun legislation that's similar, like we'll accept your ID for something, right? I mean, those aren't really the kind of concerns I think that would be arising with like a body of substantive lawmakers, right? Between states. That would raise very deep and troubling concerns that would need to be addressed in the federal courts.
So if I can,
but I don't think we have deep and troubling concerns over the MTA yet. The MTA serves Connecticut.
The MTA doesn't make healthcare policy. The MTA doesn't.
How are these any different questions, functionally speaking, with regards to the question of constitutionality?
It matters. It would matter in the briefs that you would write, right? Like, just because
obviously they are literally descriptively different.
What do you mean they're descriptively different?
Like they are by definition different things. Like I get that. I'm saying what mechanism makes it suddenly like that question constitutionally relevant?
Transportation versus healthcare.
The MTA doesn't create, except to the extent which Connecticut or these other states might have allowed. I actually don't know. I think MTA is under the authority of New York, correct?
Yeah, New York.
Yeah. So Connecticut gives the right to the MTA to the extent like to do stuff, right? And then they delegate to them some authority to do like to operate in interstate ways, or there might be some federal laws that because it's interstate commerce or whatever that apply there.
I'm sure it can be regulated by them, like any railroad in America can be regulated by the federal government.
It's interesting that you bring that up, actually, because if you're working on a railroad in Connecticut, you're earning money in Connecticut, and you're subject to Connecticut state taxes, potentially, although the federal government has made like these carve outs for airport people and boat people who are between state lines. Usually they only have to do taxes for their state of residency. So there are these issues that pop up from time to time, and I'm not pretending that states can't have agreements with each other with even big infrastructure things like the MTA. I think it's a different thing in kind when you're proposing an agreement that purports to limit the sovereignty of Connecticut state legislature, or for the Connecticut state legislature to delegate to some interstate compact substantive lawmaking authority. That seems like that would violate some principle of separation of powers or federalism. And I'm fairly
it would
confident.
necessitate the consent of the legislature, wouldn't it?
Okay, but the state can't just, Connecticut can't just say, we hereby grant New York all legislative authority of Connecticut. Right? They can't do that.
Yeah, obviously not. That's just like literally making another state.
So you just said that's obviously unconstitutional, or obviously it would have a problem. I'm proposing to you that anything where other states could bind Connecticut on a question of substantive law, and Connecticut couldn't by themselves, get rid of the MTA in their borders or do something like that.
Of course, under this model, they could be able to do that.
I wish you all a good night.
What is the regional compact doing if it doesn't have the force? If you can't force states to follow your laws, then the regional, it's purely precatory or advisory. And then what's the point of it?
So what you could do is say, hey, we agree upon, I don't know, this model for transit within the Northeast region. Okay. And by agreeing to this, these are the set terms. And of course, if you don't comply with it, there could be some sort of stipulations or punishment. Now, any given state could unilaterally leave, as occurred in the European Union, but that doesn't absolve them of the punishments that would come from that. It would be such a benefit to stay within the union as a whole, whether it be for transit, whether it be for healthcare, that they'll never do it.
Oh, so I see. So there will be collateral incentives. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead. Keep going.
There will be collateral incentives that might aren't forcing your hand, but they're sort of coercing you.
It's basically like political suicide, essentially.
So
I guess I don't know if that would be. I don't know
if I can respond. So Pisco. So here's the thing: is Big Do was making the association within the European Union. It's you create a series of social, political, and economic relations that basically you are to some extent sacrificing a bit of your political autonomy, in the context of the state sacrificing its autonomy, but from there you are producing a much more beneficial relationship. And I think coming back to overall some of the issues with Prime's point is that the idea of power delegation itself, and what you do is in that instance is you create a series of powers that they are delegated, but you also keep, in a way, it's not necessarily they have greater power over the federal government, but it's the ability to be more efficient and effective with deciding policy. For example, we have standards and case law. If you look at the standard case law of courts itself, you can see how they implement this series of case law, and then from there, the federal government has the ability to go over that and negate that. And so in an instance, I think it comes down to the same way the policy may be implemented by having the federal government being the ultimate arbiter itself, but not necessarily having to engage. Because a lot of the problems that the federal government has is they have to be arbiters in a lot of these minutiae of situations. And instead of having that, we can have them delegate powers while they consciously delegate the powers, but they don't lose the ability to go over that itself.
That's my favorite enunciation of whatever Prime's rule is so far. I can think about compacts which I would be in agreement with, and I'm in favor of more synchronized policy between states. I think it's crazy for like drug policy for one, that in one state you could be going to jail for the rest of your life for marijuana possession because of let's say it's a felonious charge, or sorry, a felony charge of marijuana. It's like a third strike or something. And so I'm in favor of more synchronized policy, especially between like-minded states. So to the extent that's what it is, I agree with that. I also agree with it in the context of the interstate vote compact for the electoral college. I think that compact, no one denies, right, that states have the right to allocate their presidential electoral votes pretty much however they want, right, with some limitations. You can't like never vote for a black person or stuff like that, right? There's limitations, but they're very few, if any. Right. So no one denies that states have these power. And states have made their laws such that it won't go into effect until every other state has sort of if we've passed the threshold of 270. But even still, right, notwithstanding the fact that this is a plenary power, an absolute power of the states, there will still be, you can bet your bottom dollar that the moment that threshold, if it is crossed, and I hope it is, there will be cases from here to Timbuktu. Is that a place? Timbuktu?
Timbuktu is a place, yep.
That is actually
from here to Timbuktu. Trying to invalidate that kind of electoral college workaround. So just, I love synchronization. I love comity between states. Prime, I love the motivation of what you're doing. I just want to caution you that there are perilous and dark traps ahead of you, and to be careful for them. And I love this conversation. I thought it was delightful, and thank you all for having me on. I feel horrible, so I'm going to go sleep, but much love.
We love you, Pisco. Thank you seriously for taking time. It was always good talking to you, buddy. Bye. Have a good one.
So if I could further just elaborate just a little bit.
Sure.
I think that's fundamentally core part of the issue is that so much of the powers are focused on the federal government, and so much of our focus has been placed onto the federal government by having us fully focus solely on the national elections. We are losing sight of local elections, state elections, and all these different things that fundamentally exist. And I agree the mode of states versus federal government are outdated, but I think fundamentally if we can't absolve that, we need to have greater emphasis on power delegation as opposed to losing power centralization.
Yeah, that's part of the reason. We're not only putting all that focus on the federal government, but we're losing control of our local governments in some places. I mean, you think that the federal, the general elections have low vote counts? You should look into some of the local elections and your county elections, et cetera, your state elections, because hardly anybody votes. So you just have the same people getting voted in, and getting voted in a lot of time with no challenger and no opposition at all. And then people are wondering why their cities or towns are not doing very well, or they have these terrible policies, et cetera. And then they're voting in the general elections thinking that those things are going to somehow fix what's going on locally, and they just
trickle down politics don't
I
work.
agree with that.
Yeah,
but
just not even paying
oftentimes
attention.
the issue is that America operates, especially at the municipal level, and this is a bit of a weird derail, all right, but oftentimes at the municipal level, we treat the individual municipalities as if they're akin to states, when in reality they don't have nearly any of the same funding mechanisms and or any of the same abilities to take out debt. And so when cities become decrepit and the entire state is essentially expected to uphold the city, because it's probably typically most states have their biggest city that's the most important place, all right, they're expected to take on the cost of this place, and the entire state has opposition to it. Whereas instead of where in other countries, for example Australia, there is no real such thing as a municipal government. There's just the state government, which has jurisdiction over everything that matters for the most part. And that, I feel is a far more involved way for everybody to handle that sort of thing than the municipal government, where we have 50 of them, and then hopefully they all create some sort of body to actually handle issues, all right, and then hopefully the state government comes in, and also hopefully the federal government comes in, versus if we just had the state government, all right, just do this, handle most of the important things, that wouldn't really be a question. You'd at least be taking out one of the layers of possible fuckery that could occur.
Yeah, I guess so, but
I gotta run, so it's alright if I make one last point for
Sure, go
leaving.
ahead, please.
Yeah,
And
so
good night.
anarchists and not whatever the heck. Who's that guy?
Want.
Want? Yeah, I
Oh,
don't know.
want
is Amprim.
Fake news
I
anarchist.
don't know what planet all those takes are coming from. But yeah, sorry, I feel like I didn't really get to engage with the actual thought experiment earlier, and like, and part of this because like I'm tired, but also like, to be honest, I would like to participate more in like the details of the discussion, but I don't actually have a ton of like knowledge of how government works, like, as it exists now.
Which is why you're an anarchist, clearly. Go ahead.
I don't understand this. Get rid of it.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, well, because I focus on other things, I would like to think that I think about fundamental questions about how human social relations and how that relates to social structures, and government to me is just one way of doing it, and I have to think about it because it has important implications in our life. But I also spend a lot of my time trying to imagine alternatives, or coming up with how like thinking about how power exists outside of a system of representative democracy. But to actually think about this idea of like this layer and like the regional things, I think that what Tiberius was saying, I would agree with that. Where I think that we would see the same kind of effects just reproduced at like a different scale, where like you still find some kind of gridlock, where the South would be uh, would be red, or whatever the equivalent is, and the Western province would be stuck, and you might still find this like gridlock just at a different layer. And so I think that you'd have to like restructure just the way that power works across the whole system. Otherwise it would just reproduce itself, in my opinion, and that would include things like powers outside the centers of power outside of government too. So like capitalism, private industry, for instance. But I do like the idea of like, so I'm going to synthesize this with like my kind of vision too of like more like anarchist, like federation type society. Like I think it makes sense for people to organize across like regions. So like I mean like at that scale, like I think that people freely associating to form some kind of body that interacted between like dividing up this part of the continent into like quadrants, or however many 4 to 6 provinces, or 4 to 6 entities, but they would be freely associating with each other, and they'd be kind of on a egalitarian footing, and they wouldn't have the power to like force whatever decisions were made at that level to the people who are the constituents. Any power that they have would be given from the bottom up. So that's kind of how I would synthesize that. I think it's a really cool idea though. But yeah, thanks everyone. Heading off.
Yeah, sure thing.
Yeah, thanks for being here. Really
See you
appreciate
later,
it.
comrade.
Yeah, I thought. Yeah, okay. So we don't have to. We can talk about something else. But I think it's a really interesting idea. Just think, even if like not this idea, like I'm not married to this idea, right? Like not this is the only idea to.
This is all thought experiment. We're all just like throwing shit out and see what sticks.
Yeah, exactly that. I'd like us to rethink like what's possible and like what government can be, because I think especially for us who are politically minded, we get so trapped in the day-to-day, like what's happening like in Washington, or maybe if you're super involved on the state level or local level, right? Like on the mechanics of government as it is, right? You kind of get trapped in that mindset. I'm thinking we could actually decide to change these rules. Like we can make that decision. Government works how we want it to work. So if we just collectively decide this is not working, we'll try something else, right? Maybe a monarchy. I don't know. We could do that.
No, Prime.
Yeah,
Prime. Belgico and
Prime wants to be the king.
and
The goal. Prime for Monarch 2024.
I mean, the Monarch system. If I see you actually the Monarch system, I'll overthrow you. Okay.
But Big Dude, did you understand what I was trying to go with there?
Yeah, because at first it sounded more like akin to like an EU type of system, but like if it's just a system of like where like states just get together and just be like, hey, like you guys are running this, like Massachusetts, for example, all right, they say, hey, you're running this train line, right, and like we're really poor and we really don't want to make the capital investment. All right, but like you have like a nearby town, like if you could service this town, all right, it'd provide us a connection to like this major metropolitan area in your state. I see a lot of value in like that type of government, because like oftentimes people don't think beyond just their borders. They literally just think, all right, within my county, within my like municipality, within my state, when like it's way more efficient to just like have people do things together.
I'm not sure I would just completely agree with that perspective. I feel like as citizens, we've been so like neutered to the extent that we think the only way we can meaningfully change things is on the national level. So like, I'm not sure I agree with that big dude. Like, that's I feel like the extent that people focus on local level of elections, like
Well, people don't focus on it at all, but like
Yeah,
the
exactly.
individuals who do focus on it, right, typically are not very I don't know how to say this, like I don't want to say selfish, but like it's kind of the word to describe them. They're very self-interested with regards to
Yeah,
how they
yeah,
act.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So like
So
individual level of actors on a smaller scale compared to like collective organization.
Like in a
compared to
positive,
national.
like in a more
Yeah,
positive way,
and
like
that's
they
why, like,
actually
you know,
care about what's going on in their communities. Like, is that what you
and
mean
that,
by self-interested? Like,
yeah,
that's why
what I
just taking the time to
yeah, like
involve
thinking
themselves.
about like, because your jurisdiction's only over like your municipality, okay, whatever, but like you have to think about it like this entire region. All right, there are suburbs where probably a large portion of commuters or like people live in, yet like these people's concerns about the city are almost ever not heard, or might be disproportionately heard in some cases based on certain structures. And all of these things are like questions that, like, if we just didn't have municipal government, we just had like one big state body handle this entire thing, wouldn't exist in the first place. When
Yeah, but
you
then
can
you would
you could
have-
expand
Well,
this
but
question to
also-
states.
I mean, but also you could just make the argument that like if people were more involved, then these things would work more to the benefit of them, I guess, to some, because like I have an example that just happened in my city. Like there was like there was some like local deal with the government to like subsidize or like basically they bought up a whole swath of like land that was like mostly all rentals, and they're turning it into like a bunch of these complexes, but these complexes are going to be like more high end or middle class like apartments, uh and the people that were there are basically all lower class before, but since they were all renting, they've all just been bought out, like, so they have no choice but to move. But it's like these things were voted on, and like there were like town halls and these things, but since nobody's involved, they didn't know till after the fact that the decision is made that there was going to be this change. So then now they're just basically all screwed. Whereas if they were, more involved, and I know it's hard to, I guess, to be more involved in some cases too, but it's like, I don't know.
No,
like,
but you see,
like I guess because I started getting more involved or reading into a lot of these things because I got married and we're like starting to talk about kids. So that was like a big factor for me. Like, not to mention that Trump was in office and all the politics were kind of going crazy. Like, and no, everyone was talking about it. But that helped, kind of like that was like a big catalyst too. So it's like, I don't know. It just seems like
if I could respond, American Nacho, it's.
Yeah.
I mean, there's like people are politically neutered to not be involved in local politics, but there's also a lot of like economic and social conditions that prevent people from engaging in politics like meaningfully on the local and the state level. It's like, for example, people like working 40 plus hours per week, and that fundamentally
Yeah.
prevents people from being able to engage in politics itself because people are spending so much time just getting the basic necessities of survival. But then there's also we have to also see at like state levels, like people are being socially primed not to engage in like voter processes, like like the history of like voter suppression in terms of like poll taxes and literacy tests. But then you also have like new examples of this coming to fruition, like Georgia, Texas, like those are prime examples of like how voters are like being prevented from acting. And then we also have seen like actively like voters are being like taken out of the ballots. Not like the Trump example, but like black people, like a lot of black voices, are being taken out of the ability to vote. So like,
well,
there's a lot of series of conditions that are preventing people from voting
but
itself. Like the voter ID laws are like inherently problematic too.
yeah, but also you can see, like, I mean, Georgia's a good example of like when you get more voters involved, like when you get more people voting, and that they feel like they're getting the results that they want. Like Georgia's blue for like the first time in I don't know how long.
Yes, but you
and
need to.
then they also won the Senate seats there. So it's like,
But
I don't know. I
but
think
politics
we can help each
fundamentally.
other get more educated and get more
Yes.
voters out there. I guess I don't know.
Yes, that's one
So-
component of it, but
so
people
what-
fundamentally need the free time. Politics is based on the amount of free time a person has. The more free time you have, the more meaningfully you can engage within politics itself. If
So
workers, if the average worker doesn't have the time, then they can't do it.
So I agree with like most of the sentiment there. Obviously, there's a lot to like value in the fact that like if people are more involved, you have like more people's voices being heard. It's obviously going to lead to more representative governance. The thing is that I think there are fundamentally some questions. Like it doesn't matter even if you have 100% of people voting in a state. Their jurisdiction is limited to their area. There will be a limited amount of funds for their state. So say like what we're describing with PrimeCayes, all right, in order to like raise to collect enough taxes, presumably, all right, to like serve the population of Vermont, all right, that would be pretty high jump, I'd presume. Versus like say, what if Vermont was just like a little block out of an entire region of states trying to set up a healthcare policy? Wouldn't matter. Be nothing, or just be a drop in the bin. So I'm saying that like these types of questions are fundamentally speaking like the things that like it doesn't matter how many people you have, just like it's just due to your nature of governments, how big your state is, how many people you have in your borders. Like all these things are like the types of questions that like just can't be solved by having more people vote. You need to expand.
Well, yeah. but
Okay,
there's-
yeah, I see what you're saying.
But there's also, by having people engage, the ability to engage less, it's going to like fundamentally affect the amount of focus and the amount of like ability to advocate in that instance. So basically, if groups of people have less money and time, then they are able to dedicate less resources, and the interactions and the level of priority that local or state is going to receive is going to be vastly different.
Okay. So I think we've run this topic into the ground. Yeah. No.
Yeah, like it's just about agreement, pretty much.
Yeah, but I think it was really interesting, and we cover a lot of interesting constitutional hang-ups, and just like a different way to organize ourselves, because we can organize ourselves a different way. It doesn't have to be this way. Think outside the box. It's kind of the point of this.
Just remember, state bad.
Okay.
Let's do that.
Hey Eagle Eye, how are you?
Hey, how's it going?
Fine.
I just wanted to stop in here to congratulate our newest YouTube partner, Mr. PrimeCayes.
Yeah, that's right. We did it.
Oh,
Like we
nice.
finally we got approval, because you got to go through like an approval process. So we just got approval.
Oh, so you can take ad revenue now?
Mm-hmm. Exclamation point YouTube. If you want to help out the channel, go subscribe to our YouTube channel and watch our videos and like them and comment on them, and then watch the ads. That part's very important. Watch the ads. So we can go. We post our VODs or clips or highlights. They go there, right? So go to YouTube. A great way to support the channel and do it for free, right? Just like watch the content, but you know, instead of watching it on Twitch VODs, watch it on YouTube. They got a better player anyway. Honestly, they got a much better player. So you know, something from the past, you want to check it out. Go there. Or you missed it, right? You missed a stream. Well, then check out the VOD there. We place it the day after here on YouTube because of contractual agreements. It can't be immediately after. It has to be like 24 hours after. But after that, yes, you can see the VODs and appreciate them and love them, and then support the channel that way. So thank you for everyone who has subscribed so far. Thank you so much. The YouTube channel exploded. We didn't think we could get partnership this quick at all. But you all made it happen. You all made it happen. So thank you so much for being so kind as to help out the channel that way, and continue to do so. Just go and watch the content. I think And thank you to my trusty editor, Eagle Eye Valor, for being so kind. Do you get revenue from YouTube premium watchers? I have zero idea how that works. Yeah, I think you. I mean, I imagine so. I don't see why you wouldn't. Yeah, I don't imagine. I don't see why you wouldn't. That would make sense
Watch
to me.
Prime lose its sanity day by day.
Yeah, but essay, please watch. I'm almost certain that we get revenue, even if you aren't seeing ads yourself. I think if you're a premium watcher, then I guess maybe probably your subscription is close to that. Well, I don't know. We'll figure it out. But yeah,
we get. So the answer to the question is yeah, we get paid. YouTube Premium gives a secondary revenue stream for us.
Oh, okay.
In addition to what we're already earning, so yeah.
Absolutely. Then essay, yes. That's yeah. You use that option if you like. So I want to thank our trusty editor. You can't see his face. Eagle Eye Valor for
It's dark in here.
Oh,
I
okay.
want to turn on my light.
All right, he's naked. So I thank him for being for helping us out. He came and he said he wanted to be a part of this channel, wanted to help make this happen, wanted to help it grow, and so he came on as an editor here. And wouldn't have him without it because I do not have the time to edit all these fucking videos. I make a lot of fucking videos, but he's doing it for us, and we're paying him for that, and it takes money. So if you want to help the channel grow, one, watch the YouTube videos, we get ad revenue. That some of that goes to him, and two, donate to the channel like our good friend's Essay. She does it. You want to be like Essay? She's a cool lady. So follow her example. Donate bits, donate subs to the channel. Sub yourself if you haven't done so already. Because we're giving a lot of content here. We're blowing up. So I thank all of the people who have been giving.
Costs a lot of money to keep Eagle Eye chained up in the basement. Okay.
Yeah, damn right.
And throwing ramen at him.
And very expensive.
So are there any lefty channels that are up and running that?
I got my Twitch stream running right now. Yeah. So, hi, I'm Wordy. I'm pretty new to this whole business. Probably got into the internet debates last week. Curious about getting in for a while. I got a thing called Going. It's Wordy Talks. So like I'm a big politics, big gay, big gamer. So
So you're saying you're streaming now?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
How?
This is like the perfect place.
Do you wanna raid?
Sure. Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
I dropped it into self promo.
No, put it in my chat. Just type in my chat so I can see. So it'll make it easier.
Give me a second.
Yeah.
Okay.
Tomorrow.
Let me just.
Tomorrow we'll have Amazon Lily, here, and that'll be great, right? Yeah, it'll be great. I'm like checking myself. Will that be great? No, it'll be great. We got a great.
Well, do we have on the panel tomorrow? Do we know yet? So we can give them a little taste.
We have something. Hold on. Don't have that pulled up. We got Alice After All. We have Empress. We have Eris. We have Lyra C, who joins us for the All Black Everything panel. So she'll be joining us. Then we have Samantha. We have Red Charlotte. Red Charlotte will be back with us, and maybe Mixed Vivian Wolf. Maybe. Yeah.
Sounds like a loaded Amazon Lily panel.
Yeah. So you definitely want to come back for that. You there yet? You there?
Yeah, I'm loading up. Sorry.
I'm not on it tomorrow, Prime.
Oh, okay.
I tried to fill as many spots with as many awesome people.
Is Joe going to be there?
She said she was.
She's not in the group chat.
Yeah. Okay. So finally, someone dropped out. It was at 10 earlier today.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Let's put Joe there. Oh, thank you, Bad
I'm on
Hot
it right now.
Thank you. Thank you, Bad Hot Summer, for being so kind as to give 5 hot tier 1 gift subs to the channel. Very much appreciated. Thank you so much. That's the exact way that you get this channel going and growing. It's by individuals like that. Thank you so much. It really does matter. Are you there yet? Are you typing? Oh my god!
Skip me for now, and I'll come back to it.
No, not skip. I'm trying to raid you. Like holy crap! Just like
I'm trying to bring up my Mac because my computer's dumb.
What is? It's just all right. do me a favor. DM me your username. Your
Yeah. No problem. No problem.
Okay. Oh, God.
I wasn't prepared for this. I'm sorry.
Oh my God. No.
I thought you were already live.
Yeah, but like my computer's like.
Oh my God. Just
sad.
keep going. Keep going, please. I really would like to go. Anytime. And we're shedding viewers now, so you're getting less of a raid each second that
Fucking
goes
pro
by.
streamers at work here.
Fuck you, Sam.
Oh my God, just go. Ignore. Go. DM me. Or whatever that is so I can... Oh my God. All right, so anyway, thank you, Nacho, for being here.
It's
Thank
literally
you.
in the self-promote.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Okay, let me just drop the link for you.
Sure. Go ahead. Thank you,
Yeah,
Rage.
we can shout out the chat. We can shout out the panelists. American Nacho is a person who does things and stuff. And Rage comment. Wow, Rage comment is here too. Cool. Rage comment. I've never met you before, but you're a person. Nice.
Okay.
Big dude.
Also probably
Big
does
dude.
things.
Yeah, streamer maybe.
Okay.
Rage comment. Do you stream? No. Oh well.
No, not yet.
No, like
Well, you should.
I just have an aggressively mediocre YouTube channel that I made when I was 13.
Gotcha.
Sick.
All right, and thank you so much.
Oh,
for
and
Vanessa.
comrades and listen, comrade Samantha's here. She is fantastic and wonderful, and called me mean things earlier.
And well, she does that to everyone. It's
If you don't
determined
shut up, I'll
environment.
do it again, Eagle. Okay.
All right, off we go. Really appreciate all of you. Go on to Wardy here, who is streaming. Be kind, follow the person, and we'll be back tomorrow. All right, bye.
All right, we're